We are live. We are recording. Phone lines will remain off. Go for it.
Very good. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Town of East Hampton Planning Board meeting for July 12th, 2023. We have a few matters on for subdivision, subwaiver, and site plan review, and a couple of matters on for board of review. So let's get right to it. The first application is Chelsea Woods modification. I understand Ms. Wiltshire is in the waiting room, Matt?
I am admitting her right now.
Very good.
Is Randy on?
And Randy, you're on. We have Randy?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Randy, this is your application. And so, Tina?
Okay.
If Lori is Ms. Wiltshire on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Very good. Okay, very good. All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Hello, everyone. This is the Chelsea Woods subdivision modification request. Right now on the screen, I have the property location up. It is located in Wainscott. I'll zoom out so you can see a little bit more geographically where it is. The application is to modify the approved Chelsea Woods subdivision that was approved in 1997. This subject parcel was lot 3 in the original subdivision, and one of the conditions of approval, as well as covenants and restrictions that were recorded on the property, required that all buildings and structures on the lot, excepting driveway and utility lines, but including all other accessory structures, would be combined to the building envelope. The application is requesting to revise this to allow fences, gates, berms, and walls to be outside the building envelope. And I'm going to bring up what the applicant submitted, which is the highlighted portions here of this portion of the survey show the structures that they are requesting to be outside the building envelope. The cover letter included a narrative that included a brief description of why some of the features were outside the building envelope, and those are where they appeared. Those are summarized in the memo. Stone walls in the driveway were reportedly required to stabilize topography. Retaining walls around the site were needed to stabilize the driveway, as well as driveway entrance here. And there is a deer fence that is outside the building envelope in specific portions to keep deer out of the yard. 6 of the sections of wall that were constructed within the common driveway do show clearly on the most recent CO for the property, but they're not discussed in the enumeration of features on the site. Regarding reviews that consider changes to prior subdivision approvals, as everyone knows, the planning board has a longstanding policy to determine that there's a change of circumstances that warrants looking at the approval again. And if the planning board determines the change of circumstances is present, then the board can review the modification request and determine whether it's consistent with the town's subdivision regulations. The applicant hasn't articulated specific changes in the circumstances in each of the locations, and our suggestion to them is that they should provide more information that warrant, that substantiate the change in circumstances for the board's consideration. The things that I discussed in my report, lot 3 here has a building envelope, which you can partially see here, and I'm going to move to the full picture of the survey just so you can see it in its totality. I'm sorry, did someone say something?
I think this.
Can you see the? Okay, thanks, Nancy. You can see the survey here now, right? Yeah. So this is the lot 3 building envelope. In the files that I was able to locate, there was no information regarding what drove the planning board to create the building envelope for this lot. I think some of the files have been, lost. It's an older file and it's no longer existing in our records. There are significant slopes in this area of the site, so that certainly could have been a factor, and there are topographic maps within the file. There also was suggested there could be some protected species within the woods here. I couldn't find documentation on that. Nevertheless, the building envelope is present, and the applicant is requested to undertake help the board understand why the structures can't be modified to comply with the envelope as it was mapped. I'm going to note that the fence here is going to require ARB approval as well, even if the board does agree to be outside the building envelope. And it's not clear why at least the fence couldn't be within the mapped location. The other thing we found of note is that the file contains sign-offs from the town engineer regarding the roadway design and the roadway construction. It's unclear if those walls were built at the time or what has changed since then. So I'm interested to hear that from the applicant. In conclusion, before I conclude, I will show you the pictures that the applicant sent just from starting from the top. So here are the pictures of the walls. You can see there's elevation change between the driveway bed and the budding forest. In the picture, there's the driveway walls, the entrance of the property, and a terraced plateau. In conclusion, not appropriate to construct sites in ways that do not conform to subdivision conditions. The applicant's requesting a change in the conditions of approval, which were also, mapped on the site as a declaration of covenant restrictions, which really demonstrates the importance of those factors in the planning board's decision-making at the time. So in order to revise these, it's recommended that the applicant supply further evidence supporting the change in circumstances for the board's consideration.
That's it? Okay, that's plenty. All right, Ms. Wiltshire.
Yes, hello.
Floor is yours.
So the common driveway was actually built by the developer and approved by the town attorney. It did include the stone walls that stabilized the topography on the sides of that driveway, which is more like a road serving 4 residences. They do show up on the survey that accommodated the CO for the house on lot 3. Also on the survey for the CO for the house, it shows a partial retaining wall for the driveway in the parking area. And that was extended down to the common driveway because the slope on the driveway itself was so severe on one side that whenever there was a heavy rain event, it was washing out. So they had to stabilize it with continuation of that wall, which is only a snippet into the building envelope, maybe 10 feet. Yeah, it's about 10 feet into the outside of the building envelope, sorry. Same thing is true for the 2 retaining walls in the back that create the plateau, which is the lawn of their backyard. That was a severe slope that kept falling off and eroding in rain events. So they had grass on it and such, and it kept washing away. So they put the retaining walls in to contain that and create a flat surface for the lawn. And there's about 5 feet of each of those retaining walls outside of the building envelope. The deer fence, they are going to relocate to a conforming location within the building envelope. There was no hardship for that. They put it up where the fence people put it up where they wanted to put it up. They understand it needs to move. They're willing to move it, and they know they need to get ARB.
Okay, thank you very much. Was there anything else?
No, I think, no, that's it, really.
Okay, very good. Do you want it to be heard?
Me?
And,
Nope, me.
oh, it's Mr. Whalen is speaking. We don't ordinarily take comments during work session, except if it's something that will bring the board some knowledge that we don't.
I think you want to hear from me.
So,
So Richard Whalen, attorney with Whalen Fowler PLLC. I'm speaking here as an individual with information and an opinion about what you're going to be discussing. I have no opinion on the actual application that's submitted. I don't really know the details other than what I just read in the memo, but I think I'm basically the source of, I can't see Sharon there, so.
I can't see you either.
I think I'm kind of the source of the issue here. The language that you find in these covenants is language I created. So I became the planning board attorney in 1989. Before then, the planning board would sometimes have building envelopes on the map, and they would just say building envelope. And there was no explanatory language. There usually wasn't even explanatory language in the resolutions. So in 89 or shortly thereafter, maybe it was till 1990, I don't know when I came up with language, but sometime very early on, I began to put language in the resolutions to explain what a building envelope is. And it would just be a provision in the conditions, very similar to the language that's cited in here. All buildings and structures except driveways and utility lines and maybe something else shall be confined to the building envelopes shown on the map. So that'd be a condition in the approval. Then we would double bank that condition by requiring the applicant to file a declaration of covenants and restrictions. And then frequently then we've been moved on and triple banked it by requiring a notation on the subdivision map, which when I became the planning board attorney, we began to require all subdivision maps, even minor subdivisions, be recorded, filed with the county clerk. So what I want to say is at that time, we're talking early 1990s or thereabouts when this language came up, we weren't thinking about deer fences, okay? There weren't didn't have deer fences in the early 1990s. That was, those have happened more recently. Fences in general, I will just say that's not certainly not what I had in mind. I don't think what the planning board had in mind. Retaining walls, well, it kind of depends. If you have a retaining wall that you need to build a driveway, then to me, that's part of the driveway. A driveway gate, that's part of the driveway. If you're putting the retaining wall to support, let's say, a patio or a pool patio or a terrace, well, to me, that's a structure. That's part of the building, that was supposed to be within the building envelope. Building envelopes then and now were usually imposed usually for two reasons. There are occasionally other reasons, but it was usually done either to establish a setback from a natural feature or because of steep slopes. That was probably in the case of Chelsea Woods. I'm almost sure that building envelope is probably done because of where the planning board believed there were steep slopes. Occasionally they were used for other purposes, but those are the most common. So, fences they're not substantial structures. So I just wanted to, the first point I wanted to make is I don't know that that's necessarily that we were meaning to say, or that the planning board meant to say, hey, everything except for the driveway and utility to get to the house, got to put it within the building envelope. I don't think fences were in mind. The second thing I want to say is more generic. And again, I have no opinion on the particular application before you, and I don't know the details of it. But whatever you decide to do, if you were to decide to say, well, some of these things should be allowed outside the building envelope, they're either part and parcel of the driveway or for some other reason. There are scores, if not more than that, of these declarations out there. You don't want to start amending them one by one. You'll drive yourself crazy. I would suggest if you make a decision that is somewhere like what Lori is asking you to do, I would recommend that town do that as a policy decision. Make a policy, discuss it with the building department or something. I don't think you want to interpret the language that's found in the resolutions, found in the covenants in a certain way. I don't think you want to start amending them covenant by covenant because you could be at that for a long time. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to that a little bit. This Chelsea Woods, I actually handled this subdivision in the end for John Leonard, who was the developer. The only lot in this subdivision that actually has covenants, restrictions, and a building envelope is this particular lot. I do agree that it was because of slopes, but it was the slopes, which is the change of circumstance that caused the erosion along the driveway and the erosion in the backyard, which is why those retaining walls were built. Like I said, I think even if Rick says, well, maybe fences weren't intended, it's not that big of a deal for us to relocate them inside the building envelope. And the stone walls were approved long before my client had anything to do with this. So it's not like every covenant is going to come before you, and there's no other lot in this subdivision that has this circumstance.
Does the planning department have anything you want to add to that?
I would just say to Rick's point about the policy decision, I don't know. I'd want to make sure we really thought through something like that, applying it more broadly here. I do think there are some unique conditions on sites, like slopes, that maybe could have been analyzed in a little greater detail in past projects that warrant a closer look. I don't think it exists everywhere. And I think if we kind of a blanket accessory structures are allowed outside of building envelopes, I wouldn't be comfortable with the implications without really studying that very closely. So I'll just add that.
Okay.
And really, none of these are actually accessory structures. They're retaining walls and fences.
The what? I'm sorry, the retaining wall was what?
Yeah, she said they're not structures, right? And that's right.
All right. And regardless, the applicant has agreed to move the fence within the building envelope.
Correct.
All right, thank you. All right, Randy.
Okay, again, I think Tina did a great job. putting all that information in the memo, and I agree with her conclusions. To me, for full disclosure, this application was brought, where Landmarks represented John Leonard at the time, and I was the owner of Landmarks then, and Lori and I worked together on this. The only other thing I can remember from then is that there's also a lot of laurel in these woods, really beautiful. And I think laurel is protected by the state. I think it's a protected species. And when I look on the aerial, there does seem to be a cluster of something down in that western, the corner where the building envelope left natural. I think there's both slopes and maybe a thicket of laurel in there. As far as the minutia, it sounds like we get a solution on the fence. We don't have to deal with that. I would say that some fences people clear to put in some fences, so we wouldn't want that as a blanket exemption. I don't think so. Let's take the fence off the table because that's going to be moved. The work in the access easement, to me, I could see that you could consider some of those retaining walls in the access easement along the driveway as necessary as part of the common driveway there. I could see that could be an interpretation. As far as the concrete wall that supports the terrace and the lawn, and that to me really looks like landscaping and a decision that was made. There's irrigation there, there's plantings. So unless I don't feel that there's I don't see any change of circumstance there. And if the person who built the house was unaware of covenants and the building envelope, I don't think that's really our problem to solve. But I don't see that particular aspect of this request as something that we would want to retroactively approve. I just think it's either an oversight on the part of the contractor or the owner, and it's not, to me, it's not part of the common driveway, and it's not part of it doesn't have anything to do with utilities. Okay, that's it.
Very good.
Can I
I just wanted to say one
photograph
thing.
again? Can you
Yeah.
put that photograph again of that one wall that he's talking about?
Yeah.
Thanks.
You want to talk about this?
I want to add one thing before you do that. Not that one. Not that
that-
one.
So
That
that's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
Yep. So that was that just dropped off from the top of the grass down below, and it was washing out. So they put the retaining, but by the way, these retaining walls were not there when the CO issued for this house. So this is a landscaper that came in after the fact, not the owner, not the contractor.
The applicant, let me understand something. Ms. Butcher, did you say before that the slopes were a change of circumstance?
No, the erosion was a change of circumstance. The slopes were the reason for the building envelope. But the erosion, especially at the driveway level place, was actually dangerous. It was falling off to the left-hand side of the driveway where you back out, and that was not great. So they had to stabilize it.
Any photos or any other, like an engineering report with evidence that erosion was chronic, significant, anything like that?
There's nothing other than the owner's observation that they were having an issue with their driveway and having their landscaper continue the retaining wall from where it was approved on the CO out to the common driveway.
Well, I don't know if we can say it was approved on the CO. That was really an error.
No,
Was
I'm
an
saying what, it was not. There was a retaining wall for the parking area at the top of the driveway. It did not extend to the common driveway. That extension was done when the slopes caused the runoff to the left side of the driveway.
Right, but a CO doesn't approve something.
No, there's a partial retaining wall. It's not in the building envelope when the CO was issued. Then the wall was extended after the CO was issued.
Okay.
Sharon, did you have something?
Yeah, so what is the drop off there that was eroding? I can't, it's hard to tell in that photograph. I mean, we're talking about 3 feet, 4 feet?
Go to the photo of the driveway retaining wall, please, Tina.
The driveway, I'm not so concerned about. I mean, I kind of agree with Randy on that. I think,
There you go. So it's about it ranges from about 1 to 3 feet.
so is that the driveway one or the one in the landscaping one though?
That's the driveway one.
Okay, and
Well,
what,
well, wait a minute. I'm at the common driveway, which is within the access easement. That those retaining walls, I think, you could argue are part of the driveway, as Rick said. These ones, yeah.
They
But
are. And they were there when
Once
the
you
CO.
get onto the applicant's lot, however, we're not talking about the common driveway anymore. We're talking about their driveway, and it's a different story, I think, once you're on their lot. Just to try to clarify.
Michael, did
Yeah.
you?
No, my question is, and about that image right there. So there was a retaining wall and there wasn't, it looks like 8 or 9 feet in the building envelope was built after the fact because of the washing out. So, but like you had a retaining wall and then this lower portion was washed out and then you just added to the retaining wall?
Correct. So where my car is parked, there was a retaining wall in the parking area itself.
Right.
Then you can see what happens with the grate. It drops from the driveway, which is flat, and it runs off to the left-hand side, and that was washing out. Their driveway was washing out, so they had to stabilize it, so they continued that retaining wall.
What about the other wall? What, I'm not sure I understand.
The garden wall,
purpose of
yeah.
The other wall.
yeah, that,
What is the reason for this wall?
Just to create the tab, again, it was sloping off. You can see the flat part where the grass is, and then there's about a 4-foot grade change from the first wall. Maybe it's a 1 foot from wall 1 to wall 2, but then it drops down another 3 feet on the side, and that hill was washing off as well. So they stabilized it with a wall.
Lori, can you just clarify something for me? Isn't most of that is within the building envelope except the very end of it? Is that correct?
Correct. Like I said, it's only about 4 feet of that wall, the end of it, that's not in the building envelope. It's only about 10 feet of the driveway retaining wall that is not in the building envelope.
Okay.
Did you say only 4 feet of this wall that we're looking at?
is it-
Yes.
Yeah.
Sharon, did you have something else?
so which end, the end,
Far end.
the furthest end?
Yes.
And where is this wall in relation to the driveway or the house?
In the back of the house, it stabilizes the terrace, which is the lawn where the pool is.
That little triangle
Yeah.
at the bottom?
Right there. That's the
That's it.
four. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I can, yeah, I mean, I think that I'm okay with the driveway. It seems like I can't imagine not retaining that. I think it would be dangerous. I mean, you would slowly just lose your gravel. And that 4 feet, I don't know if we want to make them, I mean, I think if you got rid of that 4 feet, your lawn would still be fine. If we think that that's something we don't want to,
It's a question of the inviolability of the building envelope.
Right.
That's really.
So I think if they were just to shorten that wall, they would still have what they want in their
But
lawn.
we do have a situation of a change in circumstances, whether you believe that actually occurred or
Well,
not.
I'm making them take that
Well,
away though.
I mean, I think there's a threshold.
Making them, I'm making them shorten that wall. So
No, I'm
Is that a
saying
change
if
of
there was a
circumstance?
change of circumstance, then we are allowed to.
to keep, have them keep
relax
it.
the-
Yeah.
Don't we have to first define that as a change of circumstance?
Yes.
But to
Well,
me, the driveway is
I don't-
is a dangerous situation that could be more,
Mhm.
pertinent to have this change, where if you just want to have the corner of your lawns, to me, that's not as important. I
It's
guess.
erosion in either case though, right?
But I'm speaking to what Rick said. You don't want to create a situation that it's going to affect all these other applications that may come in front of us. In this case, if we accept the fact, and, I'm not sure we can or not, because I'm not sure there's evidence to that change of circumstance. But if we accept the fact that there was a change of circumstance, then that would open up the application for us to allow these structures outside the building envelope.
It would
Yeah,
allow.
I don't think erosion, I'm not sure that erosion, the slopes are not a change of circumstances. They existed all along. They existed before this subdivision and they still exist. If the owner of the house designed a driveway or designed a retaining wall that did not adequately take into account the slopes, that's really a design problem. That's not really a changed circumstance.
I can understand that and agree with it, actually.
Well, Randy, but the change of circumstance would be the further erosion of that slope. The slope might have been at one level back then when you designed the building envelope, but if that slope deteriorated further, wouldn't that be a change of circumstance?
Well, I don't think the slope didn't change at all. What changed was the man-made improvement that was designed that cut into the slope.
But the
And what-
clearing contributed to that. Obviously, when you develop a lot, you have an allocated amount of clearing in the water protection overlay district. Once you clear a certain envelope there, then you don't have the vegetation to hold the slope in place. That's really the change of circumstance.
So isn't that a mistake in the design?
This lot's very slopey. I mean, you had to create you have to create a clearing envelope.
I mean, if the clearing, if the clearing, I'm sorry, if the building envelope was created at the time that you knew that the owner knew that there was a slope there, why was the building envelope created in that place?
So the building envelope was dictated by the planning board. But if you look at our clearing line, it's actually very tight. It's very tight. It's not even taking up the entire building envelope. It's taking up a small portion of it.
I'm sorry, Laura. Could you highlight where the driveway one? That's the one that's of greater concern to me because
This is the terrace plateau?
right.
Okay, so yeah, right here.
That's
And then the driveway.
That's the
That one I'm not so,
No, the driveway's the other side, right?
It's the driveway. It's the idea that you're going to be, damage on the driveway there.
yeah. I think the driveway's
As a
more.
practical matter.
Right. And don't forget that these landscapers they didn't know about the covenants, but they also don't consider these to be accessory structures. They consider them to be landscaping features.
Well, yeah, but the landscaper works for the owner, and so it's on the owner.
Back in the
Go ahead.
day, we didn't used to actually regulate fences and walls.
No, well, thankfully and appreciatively, the fence isn't an issue. So, because if the fence was an issue, we'd be having a much different discussion. And so, taking the fence out of the picture, we're focusing at this point on these two issues of the slopes and the impact of the slope. Ian, go ahead.
Well, I guess to Lori's last point, you're not suggesting that we didn't regulate them at the time of the approval, though, are you? Because that would be a clear change of circumstance.
Well, I
And I
mean,
think
the way
that law was on the books. I think
the
that they
covenant
were regulated.
reads that everything except for utilities and driveways needs to be contained in the building envelope. But back in the day, we didn't even have to get permits for fences. I mean, we're not talking about
At the time of this application?
or landscaped retaining walls that are less than 4 feet tall, which both of these are as they extend outside of the building envelope.
I don't know the answer. Does anybody else know the answer? If they're at the time of the approval of the subdivision, whether they were regulated?
Well, fences and walls and berms have been regulated since the 80s.
Okay, so yeah, so I think that that's not a change. I do think anything that was on the CO to me, and perhaps we could gain consensus at least on those structures, that's a pretty clear change of circumstance. You got a CO for structures. So I, for one, would be okay with allowing, common driveway walls and whatever other, portions of those retaining walls were approved by the engineer and then later CO'd. I agree with, because the landscaper didn't know and built the wall too long. That seems like a tough argument to me. So,
Tough to make.
yeah. So I think in my mind, anything that was CO'd, that's a clear change of circumstance, and I would be in support of amending. That part of the driveway, if there's part that wasn't CO'd and was extended, kind of see it either way, but circumstance.
I'm sorry, you broke up. Can you say that one more time, Ian?
Well, I think anything that's on the CO, to me, there is a change of circumstance.
I heard that part.
I think that the landscaping wall, that doesn't seem to be a very strong argument for a change of circumstance that we should, amend covenants for. Whatever small portion of the driveway was added, I think honestly, I think it's a tough case to argue a change of circumstance other than you built the driveway. But I think to Randy's point, that was a design choice. I get Rick's broader point that he made that can be considered part of the driveway, but maybe at the time of the driveway construction.
Yeah, so I mean, the tiny little, so the way we're asking to change the covenants is to just change the language slightly. We're basically, I'm going to take the word fences out, I'm going to take the word berms out, and I'm going to take the word gates out. The only thing I'm going to ask is that we allow retaining walls in the outside of the building envelope, as shown on the survey.
That would mean you could build a retaining wall down the steep slope on the west side down into the Laurel patch. So I don't see.
We'll just reference the survey. We'll say that the retaining wall is in the common driveway, the retaining wall at the bottom of the driveway, and the retaining wall for the terrace landscaping can remain.
It seems to me that there's a lot of space associated with this wall here. I don't see a strong reason why that couldn't be modified or shortened to stay within the envelope. I heard the board say. I think that's a really strong point. And I think having broad language about retaining walls outside the building envelope is also not something we want to do. To Randy's point, want to open it up, right? So if you are considering that because there were severe erosion property, concerns on the property and that the design did not anticipate them.
It could, that wall, Tina, where you're talking, as you said, it could turn along the building envelope there and probably get the same result.
Yeah, I think there's options here from a design perspective.
Yeah.
The driveway stuff, relocating the driveway, you need to stabilize a structure you're building over, to me, and you didn't anticipate, you didn't build it right, but now you have. It seems to me a stronger case.
That was a change in circumstance? See, I don't see how building it is a change in circumstance.
Yeah, or they have to redesign the driveway, I mean.
Yeah, no, I know, I understand. I mean, that's effectively what we're talking about here is whether, are we forcing this as a change in circumstance because that's the standard? And, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I'm guessing that there's some belief that it's a hardship to have to change or move the driveway. And there isn't, which is not something that I think we're concerned with the gardener's wall, whatever he's calling it. But I sure don't like a moving target change of circumstance.
I agree. I think that seems pretty forced. I think to Rick's point, in terms of creating a policy here, we might not actually need to find a change of circumstance. We just need to say that retaining walls for driveways are part of the driveway. And I think that I would feel a lot more comfortable with that decision, because I think that we're not just forcing it because we think. But frankly, I've got no problem with the driveway retaining wall. I just agree with Sam. There's no change of circumstance there. So if that's what we have to find, I don't know how we get there.
Well, just know that if we do that, now every retaining wall attached to a driveway is part of the driveway.
I'm not prepared to do it tonight. I'm just saying that would be, that might be something to look into more broadly, to Rick's point.
But does that mean that the applicant gets effectively what they're asking?
Well, tonight I'm personally prepared to vote yes on anything that's on the CO. No to the terrace, and fortunately, probably no to the driveway extension. If right now we'd have to find a change of circumstance there.
Can I just make a comment, Sam?
Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, Ed, is that you?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say I support Ian's approach to this, which I think is really the most logical one. I really do think we have to be very, very careful about being too loose with defining changes in circumstances. And this does not at all feel like one to me, particularly since this building envelope was established before this particular house and driveway were contemplated. So, I mean, it is really, in many ways, perhaps a bad design decision to put the driveway where it is. But I do think I would support the idea of kind of amending the regs here such that retaining walls for driveways were included more broadly. I do think that is a good idea, but we're not here to do that tonight. So I would cast my vote on the side of whatever is on the CO and approved. I think is something that we could stand behind in this particular instance tonight.
All right, I'm going to ask if Randy, do you have anything you want to add? Because after this, I'm going to check on the table on the dais here, see if there's any further comment, and then I'm going to call the questions.
Sam, can we clarify what is, first of all, just say that a CO issued in error does not grant any approval or rights to somebody. It's just a mistake. But I'm curious to see what CO, what is it that Ed and Ian are talking about with the CO? What did the CO, aren't there more than one CO?
There's one CO, and the only thing that's shown on the survey are the walls that stabilize the common driveway that were built by the developer and approved by the town engineer before this house was even built, stone walls.
So it's just the retaining walls in the access easements?
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
The CO survey is up on the screen now. So the stone walls at like the entrance to the property and these other links. The driveway is in the place that it's in, but there's no wall evident.
Correct.
All right.
So I have a dumb question. So I remember looking up height of fences and stuff. Is there any and height of berms? I mean, this is only a foot. Does that mean anything? That it's only a foot off the ground instead of like we're not going to approve a 4-foot retaining wall. This is only a foot or 18 inches. Does that mean anything? I mean,
what do you think
It wouldn't need a permit.
so I can put up a 4-foot fence, and I don't need the town or anyone to approve it if I'm, set back from.
But not if it's outside of a building envelope that prohibits it.
That's my dumb question. So can nothing be built outside?
Everything has to do with the inviolability of the building envelope that's been created.
And the covenants and restrictions that just affect this lot.
Couldn't we, Sam, simply interpret this, or maybe ask the building inspector, that if the retaining walls in the access easement are interpreted to be part of the common driveway, then we don't have to modify anything.
Well,
We don't have,
yeah, no, I was, when Ed talked before about changing the policy, I'm trying to think how that would come about. I think Ed said that. And maybe that would be a more artful way of addressing this particular problem.
And I'd be comfortable with that if somebody determined that that wall was part of the driveway and therefore was excluded from the restrictions, and I'd be good with it.
But that'll also most likely create, going forward, a determination, not a determination, but reliance.
But anything that's
There'll be
determined to be
reliance on
part of the driveway, I think I would always be good with.
How would you arrive at that conclusion?
and
I wouldn't.
The building inspector
not.
would.
But it's an access easement, but it's still part of this building lot. I'm not sure.
Well, the idea is, at least as I understand right this moment, referring the question of whether or not this particular, with respect to the driveway, whether that's considered part of the driveway, so that whether the retaining wall is part of the driveway, such that it's not subject to the building envelope problem. It's an exception.
I got you now.
To me, that question only really matters for the driveway on the lot itself. The common driveway, because it was CO'd,
Yeah.
I think we have a change of circumstance. I don't think we need to belabor that point.
I agree.
The other short wall, I'm fairly open to it being there, but I don't think there's a change of circumstances that allows us to find it. So maybe you ask the building inspector and say, hey, is this considered part of the driveway or is it a structure?
Ian, there's a slight problem with the common driveway in that it leaves the access easement and goes into the building, the section of the lot.
Yeah, but I'm because it's on the CO, I'm good with it. So you might not be, but I think that in that one, I don't think I need to fight it.
And it was approved by the town engineer. Without that approval, we couldn't get building permits on any of these lots.
And Randy, your first go around, you seemed open to it too. And I think we do have a clear change of circumstance there. So it's not a forced point.
I could see it. I mean, as Tina says, the access easement is part of this lot, which is also confusing. So it's the access easement is technically outside of the building envelope. I know. Yeah, I hear you. And I don't have a real problem with that. It's not going over a property line.
So let me ask you, how do we all feel about referring the issue to the portion of the retaining wall that's part of the driveway? Asking the building inspector opinion whether or not that portion of the retaining wall is considered part of the driveway for the purpose of the building envelope.
I'm in favor.
That sounds good to me.
Ed,
Yes.
thumbs up?
So
Yes.
it sounds like we have consensus.
All right,
Like,
so
right? The
that's-
the common driveway walls, we find a change of circumstances, they're okay. The lawn terrace, I don't think anybody thinks is okay.
No.
And
Well,
the driveway,
Ian, I don't know if do we need a change of circumstances in the common driveway? Because if the building inspector says that's part of the driveway, or we don't have to change the covenant, do we?
No, because it allows driveways.
No, but we're going to get our answer.
Yeah, but
So-
but the question we're putting to the building inspector doesn't have to do with the common driveway, does it?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yeah,
well, I don't
Tell me.
I don't
No,
think so.
it's been
I think it's
CO.
only there. I think that there is a change of circumstance, and I think we would change the language in a different way than the applicant suggesting, just to allow those particular structures that are on the CO.
Yeah.
Not to change the language more broadly so they can build anything they want, but just those structures that exist on the CO are allowed. And then the building inspector can rule on the one that's sort of a gray area for us.
does everybody agree on that?
Yeah.
I agree.
I do.
I'm not clear what Ian means there. What
And
the common driveway is
What I
where
mean-
yeah.
What I mean is that the common driveway has these retaining walls. I think your first comment was you don't really have a problem with that. And we
Right.
showed the picture. And my instinct is the same. And I think because that already appears on a CO, really hard to argue that that's not considered a change of circumstance. So I think we can just give them their answer here and change the language to say, you know, everything's the same except for the structures that appear on this map, the CO, are okay, meaning those two. And then the driveway on the parcel that was extended a little bit farther than is allowed, we asked the building inspector if that's part of the driveway and therefore we don't have to find a change of circumstance. You're right, that logic would also carry to the common driveway, but I don't think we need it, and I think we can give them their answer because there is indeed a change of circumstance.
I agree with that.
We may not have any issue at all in common driveway, really.
No, it doesn't sound like
Might
we
not.
do. Doesn't sound like we do, but actually, we don't.
Yeah, so that's just,
I don't see it. So that's it. So what we'll do is we'll refer to the building inspector the question of whether or not the portion of the driveway on the property that is outside the building envelope, the portion that has the retaining wall, whether or not that is considered part of the driveway such that it doesn't matter that it's outside the building envelope.
Yep.
We'll clean up the language.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Sam, what about, so then the fence is being moved, and what about that?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Randy. That's something that we should, we'll make it clear in our letter to the applicant that's a given, that the fence is going to be moved within the building envelope.
Yep.
And what about the landscape wall?
No, that one, there's no consensus, there's consensus that it's not.
So look, we're being asked to change the language. I think I'm suggesting, I think we mostly agree, we change the language to say the walls that are on the CO, meaning the ones in the common driveway, are allowed. That's the change of the
Because
language.
there's a C of O.
The rest of the
And that's
language
change.
remains, which keeps the
Right.
terrace illegal,
Right.
the fence illegal, and the driveway extension, the little retaining wall illegal, unless the building inspector says that it's part of the driveway.
Yeah.
Yes.
All
But
right.
they still need a modification unless they're willing to remove that wall, that landscape wall.
The landscape wall, we're not agreeing to.
Okay,
That's
good,
just,
okay.
The only change in language we're saying is referencing the CO, which would then allow for the common driveway retaining walls.
Yes.
I think that.
no, that's it. That's it.
Yeah, that's
All right.
exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay,
Thank
on
you.
to the next. Thank you very much, Wiltshire. Okay,
Thank
the
you.
next one
Hey,
we'll do is.
before we move on, Sam, I'm sorry.
Ed. Yeah, please.
Randy, I'm not sure if you're experiencing this, but there's a lot of staticky kind of
Yes.
interference.
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
I don't know if there's anything can be done about that or what might be causing it.
Okay, Ed, this is Matt from LTV. We are aware of the audio issue, and we're trying to resolve it as quick as we can. Thank
Okay,
you.
Great. Thanks.
All right, we're going to move on to Monroe. We have two members are recusing on that, Ian and Ed.
Yep.
Okay, and
Seeing a
Mr.
little bit.
Galen, you're here on Monroe, correct? Okay. And the last time we covered this, I should have realized that since Ian was recused, we needed to spin the wheel and get a new member of the board to be the point person on it. I didn't do that. Apologize. So I'm going to be the lucky person who will report for the board. We did spin the wheel later, and Michael, congratulations going forward. Not tonight.
This one I'll take.
It'll be yours. So, okay. All right,
Wheels
Tina,
is
go right
great.
ahead. Yes. If I had done it earlier in the day, you would have been doing it.
This is regarding the Monroe minor subdivision modification. The site is on the aerial here. It's along 3 Mile Harbor, Hog Creek Road. This has been seen by the board before, several months ago. In the initial submission, the applicant was requesting to clear the record. There was some confusion about whether or not the board had allowed the existing driveway at the time to remain when a common driveway was required in the subdivision that was approved in 1974 and then modified in 1976. But during that discussion, it became clear to all that it seemed fairly certain enough in the record that the planning board at the time did intend for there to be one common driveway from this common access point off 3 Mile Hog Creek Road. And the applicant had then countered that the reason they were asking the board to review it was due to the board not having considered the slopes that exist where this common driveway has a site access driveway. And so the board had directed the applicant to data, including a survey that included topographic information and analysis of the slopes along the common driveway. So they have submitted that, and now two cross-section analyses were provided on the survey. Cross-section 1 is for the approved driveway from the common access, and the engineers or the surveyor's information confirms that the grade is 12.6%, which is above what the town requires in subdivisions. And cross-section 2 was done along 3 sections of this driveway, the existing driveway that the applicant is requesting permission to keep, and that driveway has a cross-section less than required in the subdivision. In their submission, the applicant also provides 3 different access approaches to address the grade issues for the driveway. And the report that I provided to the board summarizes those along with my comments on each. So the first alternative was to create a longer driveway from the common driveway to residents on site. While it looks like that would work from a grade perspective, it would require new clearing in the scenic easement, obviously, that the attractiveness of that. Alternative 2 would be to modify the current site access and kind of have it curve in different ways to avoid steep slopes. The applicant didn't quantify the grade changes that would be encountered there, but said they thought it would be a modest improvement. Looking at it, it doesn't seem to be much different. The slopes are kind of pretty consistently steep right around this area of the site where we're talking about. But if the planning board wanted to more firmly disqualify that, they would have to have another cross-section prepared by the applicant's team to look at that. The third alternative was to take access from the common driveway and bring it around from the south of the site to the residents. This, again, wasn't quantified, but the slopes are pretty consistently steep here, so it doesn't seem like that would be much of an improvement. Again, wasn't quantified. If the board wanted it to be so, they'd have to have the applicant have another go. But the one thing I did notice is that you could kind of go around the property and take access from the back. That would include a lot of clearing through steep slopes, a lot of clearing on the site. It'd be very inefficient. There's a lot of drawbacks to that approach. So in considering this, again, we just talked about the board would have to find a change of circumstances. This is the longstanding policy.
Thank you. So, I'm sorry, June 28th?
June 28th, that sounds
It
right.
looks like something's happening.
Yeah, well, sadly, I don't have that one.
Okay, planning board?
Yes, we're back.
Okay, we lost you for probably about 2 minutes. We had video freeze up. I just had to re-log in, and we're still live. You might want to just go back into YouTube and find out exactly where we left off. I would say about 2 to 3 minutes.
All right, Tina?
I'm back.
Okay,
No, I
thank you.
don't
That's
think-
what we needed to know. Tina, do you know about where you were when the lights went out, so to speak?
Because this is so fun to hear, why don't I just start to make
I know
sure
where you
nobody.
No, you don't have to go from the beginning, I think.
Talking about going around.
That's right.
The
You
three
were-
alternatives.
We're on alternate number 3.
You were on number 3, exactly.
Yeah.
You go.
You had driven around to the back of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, so alternate 3 was to go to the back of the house from the south. The slopes right here are the same, but if you drove around the house, the
We're not
slopes
getting.
do seem to even out. You're not seeing the,
We don't have the
sorry about that, yeah.
topographic.
Are you seeing an Ed with an empty
There we
chair?
go.
That's it.
We were looking at you, Randy, but now we're not.
No. I was seeing Ed with an empty chair.
Just observing.
Okay, so again, access from the south, the slopes seem consistent on this portion of the site, on the eastern portion. But if you drove around to the northeast, sorry, on the western portion, on the northeast, they are a little bit less severe. However, there's a lot of drawbacks to trying to do that. You'd have to clear through areas of steep slopes, and it would be a lot of clearing and be a lot of extra coverage. It's not a great, it's not a good alternative from a planning perspective. Too many negative characteristics. We talked about this earlier this meeting, and again, it comes up that in order to review a prior subdivision, the planning board has a longstanding policy to determine that there's been a change of circumstance. And once that's established, then they can review the request to determine whether or not it's consistent with the town subdivision regulations. In this case, the planning department understands that situations where the board either could not or did not consider a piece of information can be considered a change of circumstances. And we found no evidence in the file that the driveway slope in this case was considered when they mandated that it be in the location it's in.
Could I stop you there?
Yes,
Is that absence of evidence anything other than the absence of a topographic map?
there's no topographic mapping, there's no discussion regarding slopes, there's no building envelope, right, which would also
Right.
often be indicative of there were concerns with slopes on the site. But that said, in the 70s, when this was created, they did have the ability to understand that slopes were something that they should be considering when planning. So, and I don't know that we've got the full file. So
Is there any indication that anyone walked the property and looked and saw the slope physically, regardless of topographic maps?
not that I saw. I didn't see like any pictures or anything like that would be indicative of that.
Okay.
We were also trying to look at old code, considering that this occurred in the 70s. The town code has changed many times since then. We did find, Eric Shantz actually was able to find what he believes to be a code from 1984 that had different subdivision driveway slope standards. We just can't confirm whether or not that was from 1984, in fact, but those standards were 15% per what Eric discovered. So this driveway would have, if that was the case in 1984 and before that, it would have been compliant with that, but it's not compliant with the current standards. And a change in regulation has been considered a change in circumstance in the past.
So you're saying the 15% is that short driveway? I'm gonna have to give them names.
in historical times was 15%.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, say that again? I missed
So right now in the subdivision regulations, the
Mhm.
cap driveway grade is 12%.
that. Right,
Eric found evidence that in historical times before this, it was 15%.
and
Can't
that,
be sure when it was enacted, that's the issue there.
okay, but the driveway that was approved
Yes,
was what?
12.6, which is,
12.6,
doesn't match our current day standards.
but back then it did.
Maybe.
It could have.
Maybe, depending upon when it. And if it did, that would be a change in circumstance.
If the regulations were changed, the board has had that as a clear change of circumstances.
How involved would it be to find out the answer to that question?
Nancy, I'm really going to defer to you on that. We have old code books. We don't have.
Yeah, it would probably be.
Years attributed. It would take a lot of research.
And sitting around in dusty rooms with dusty books and wearing
Yeah, we
rubber
can't have
gloves to flip.
Superior
pages and
knowledge of.
pages. Well, yeah, but there's a slight, I don't know, call it a conflict there, but, all right.
Well, I mean, obviously they give us the.
Right, well, yeah, that's true. I mean, all right, because I don't want to preview too much, but all right, that's good to know.
I mean, it is likely it could have been 1984. I know I'm saying could, but that would be a year that it would, very good chance that's when it was changed.
Okay,
Big changes, 84.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right.
So that really concludes the comments,
Okay, yeah,
there's
thank you for
really
that.
not a great
Yeah.
option. And the one that currently exists clearly does not comport with the existing standard.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the thoroughness of that report as well. Mr. Whalen.
Good evening, Richard Whalen, Whalen Filer PLLC, represent the applicant, which is Peconic Land Trust. This is a property that was donated to Peconic Land Trust. The house on the property is used for staff housing. So they want to get a C of O and be able to legally occupy the residence. The subdivision regulations, what's now chapter 220, right?
Yeah.
220 in the town code, used to be chapter 131. Those were always called the planning board regulations. They were initially adopted by the planning board, and I don't think they were actually codified, meaning adopted by the town board, until 1984. So, and I don't know what the old, I don't know anything about the prior, standards in terms of the driveway gradient.
But they would have governed this application back then.
Presumably. The planning board, just to clarify too, the planning board didn't approve a driveway location. The planning board at the time of the subdivision approval simply said that the owner of the owner of the house was the owner of the property. So they were apparently living in the house at the time, Monroe. The planning board simply required them to share a common driveway with the new driveway to be created to the lot behind them. The planning board never specified a driveway location, and I'm not sure how long this alternative location was in effect. It was apparently used for some period of time before Peconic Land Trust acquired the property. I don't even know whether it was closed down before or after Peconic Land Trust acquired the property.
By alternative location, you mean the short?
That short section. My understanding, I think, is that it was probably closed before the land trust. I don't think the land trust has ever used that driveway. Whether you come from there or anywhere around to the east until it's, as Tina indicated, you get well to the east and swing around the whole, circumnavigate the lot. Anywhere on the south side of the hill that the house is on, you will exceed a 12% slope.
Yeah.
And you can't swing further to the west towards 3 Marlborough Road because now you're bringing the new driveway into the scenic easement. So the simple solution, it was a whole complicated thing to begin with. I mean, whenever you're dealing with an existing driveway with existing utilities, mind you, and probably since that time, this, a water line has been added, it's just difficult. So the simplest thing is, the simplest thing really, and the only way that complies with the current code is to allow them to go on using the driveway that they have. And I just want to say to that, first of all, it is certainly, I don't want to make this very clear. It is laudable to try to combined driveways. I'm certainly a proponent of common driveways, but I will say, as far as this particular driveway, if you go out there, it doesn't have sight distance issues, and there are no nearby driveways on either side of the road. So leaving it where it is not really a serious conflict. And that's what we would request. Leave it where it is. It's, the land trust doesn't have to move some things or consider what to do with their utilities or any of that. Easiest solution.
Now, here's the part where I ordinarily point to somebody else besides myself, but it's me.
Well, and I just want to
Go right ahead.
and just to make sure I cover this. So the change of circumstances as we see it is that at the time the planning board required this condition, again, they didn't specify a driveway location. They just said you have to join the common driveway. They were not aware that a driveway on anywhere on the south side of the hill, which is the only reasonable connection, would exceed the code, gradient requirements.
And that's where I have a problem. I don't see that. Look and see. That is a chart. You don't need a topo map to do that. But that being said, I sympathize and agree that the simplest thing is to leave everything exactly as it is. I understand the argument about that favors common driveways. The one thing I would note from a planning perspective is that the traffic, and I stood there for a while today, traffic does move quickly in a northbound direction once it gets past Copices. This might be just because some of the restaurants and marinas are south of the, maybe it's my south and east a little off, but you know what I mean. South of that, there are restaurants and marinas. And then at this point, once it hits, once 3 Mile Harbor hits Copices, it's just residential, at least along this stretch. So in terms of traffic impact, I suppose it would be better if one driveway. But you're talking about, one driveway with however many 3 houses coming off of it. But this driveway, where it is, and if you can see right here on the map that's up, it's kind of at a bend in the road there. And the one vehicle at a time that will be coming out of that driveway would probably not endanger itself coming out. So the benefits that might ordinarily accrue from a common driveway, I don't think are necessarily a consideration. The problem that I have with the whole, this application is what the applicant is relying on as a change in circumstance. Now, I took some solace just now when I heard from the planning department that maybe back then, whenever this would have been, 12%, it would meet the then standard, but it doesn't meet the now standard. If there's some way for the applicant to dig into the books and find out if that change in circumstance occurred, then as far as I'm concerned, then I don't have any issues at all.
I didn't want to get into this, but I'm going to have to here.
Knock yourself out.
Change of circumstances. I've heard it said a number of times recently before this board that there's a long-standing policy of the planning board. That's not exactly the case. All right. If I were to give you the town code and ask you, remember the scene in A Few Good Men? Kevin Bacon brings the Marine manual up to the private. He says, show me in there where it talks about code reds. Mm-hmm. If I gave you the zoning code book or the town code book and I said, show me where it talks about change of circumstances, it's not in there. You don't have a policy. There is a policy in the state, if you will, following from the legal principle of stare decisis. Sam's obviously an attorney. Stare decisis will make you, once you make a decision, unless something changes, you generally adhere to the same decision. So we've elevated this now to a very high principle that if anyone wants to change anything, you have to show a change of circumstances. If the zoning board denies your application and you want to come in 3 years later with exactly the same application, the zoning board is supposed to say, no, nothing changed. So it arises out of a proposal to change a condition or maybe to change the ultimate result in an application. And I think you kind of guys are beginning to tie yourselves in knots that anytime anyone comes in to change anything about an application, you have to show a change of circumstances.
I'll give you one better. And if you're Kevin Bacon, I'm Tom Cruise. Neither of us. I'll give you another standard. Clear error. In the world of appellate practice, if you can point to clear error, you can say, well, it doesn't really matter what anyone said, it's clearly wrong. Now, when you go, and I know you've been to the site,
Yes.
and you go there, to me, it's obvious that it's.
Remember the driveway, the short driveway was not there when the planning board was
I
there.
understand. And what I'm saying is to the idea that you would put a car there, to me, it's a mistake.
I just don't think.
I don't know, but I don't know if I want this board to be developing to adopt that. And I agree with you that there's nowhere that it says that we're married to change in circumstance. But we have to have some sort of guiding principle here. And more important, we have to maintain, for the sake of stare decisis, the old decisions of the planning board. We have to have some standard.
If you make the change, if you deny the change now, the applicant will install the driveway and it will exceed your current code requirements, period. So you know that now. You're going to result in a driveway exceeding the 12% grade, which is in your code.
Well, that gets awful close to clear error also, but it's different. It's different.
Right.
Look, my view of it is I would let the driveway stay as it is, but I got to have a reason. There has to be some reason, because if we don't have some basis to allow this, and it's a significant thing. I mean, you're putting another driveway on a county road.
It's been there since 1957.
I understand, but we're allowing it, and we're more important than that, from our point of view, contradicting, at least on paper, a prior planning board decision. So I'm concerned. I would feel much more comfortable if I knew that the prior ruling has been usurped. That's bad use of the word, but has been overridden, if you will, by the new rule, the percentages, the 12% instead of 15%. If I knew that, then I could say, okay, you got to change in circumstances, and we can keep the change in circumstance, flawed though it may be, as our basis for reviewing prior determinations. Because more important than this is maintaining those prior determinations. We opened the door a little bit to revisiting prior determinations. We're going to have much longer meetings with many more applications of people coming in and saying, change this, change that, which we certainly don't want, and which will diminish this board, and which will diminish planning. And
let me say, so if I could, the file on this is very thin. Mm-hmm. And I think I've got most of it. I got copies of minutes and so forth. There's not much more in the planning board file from the original approval.
But it isn't this file. It's just finding out what the rule was.
And Tina and Eric, if they look back and they found there was an earlier version of the planning board regulations and the driveway rate was 15%, I'm going to accept that that's accurate. I'm not. It's to find the old planning board regulations. Is it at some point the land trust is simply going to say, look, enough. I can't spend hours and hours looking for the planning board. And I already think that the answer is 15%, which is higher than today. I mean, I think you got to make a decision, and the land trust will move on based on what decision you make.
Well,
right. We actually have the code section. We just don't have the date of when it was that.
Yeah, and then
when was the building built? When was the drive? When was the C of O issued? No, C of O.
There is no C of O.
Yeah, no, I realize that.
Well, the subdivision is what, 1976?
74, and then amended in 76.
Yeah, so
and the code changed.
I have no idea what the regulations
The house
were
was
back
there
then.
when the subdivision was approved, and the driveway was where they want it to be.
But the percentage change. When did that happen?
Well, that's the whole question.
84.
84? How sure are we of that?
I honestly have no knowledge of it. So
If they found the subdivision regulations, I don't believe were put into the code until 1984, because before then they were the planning board's regulations adopted by the planning board and never adopted by the town board. So I think in 84, kind of in conjunction with the modern zoning code, they were codified. Now, did they change that at the time?
Let me ask you questions. Would the applicant have an issue with having counsel? I mean, you don't have to do it, but our town council, just getting something to the planning board that says, this is the way it was in 76, and this was the number, and in 84 it changed, and that's what it is now, and your topo shows that you don't meet the standard now, right?
Right, we wouldn't today, right?
So if we could get that, from my perspective, we got that. And then we've got the change of circumstance. We don't have to have a philosophical discussion about whether or not change of circumstance is the standard, whether it is or it isn't. And we can move on.
It's okay by me. I'll talk to the land trust. If it takes a long time, they might just say, we
I
gotta
don't,
go forward.
Nancy, this is not going to be a forever deal, is it?
It's probably take some time.
Sometime?
Yeah.
Let me open it up to the board.
Nothing is digitized.
How do you guys feel about it?
So I have one question. So this driveway, like we have the short driveway and the long driveway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this long driveway has been in place, has been used since 1957.
Yes, we believe the house was built in 57 and the driveway goes back. I've looked at aerial photographs to 1962. The driveway was there.
So was there a short driveway at the time?
No. When in 1974, the property was subdivided. There are two lots that come off Copisi's Lane that are not related to this. They come in from the other side. There's one lot that was created behind this lot, and that's the lot that shares the common driveway. So there's only two lots that would share the common driveway. This one and the lot behind it, which didn't exist. No house was there until after the 1974 subdivision.
This is the 62 aerial.
Mhm.
So,
I,
can you guys see it?
So prior to that second house going in, there would have been no reason to have the
Common
driveway
driveway.
that is now the common driveway, which is the driveway
Right.
that this board said the 57 house should take access.
hey, listen, I'm not a lawyer, but this makes so much sense to keep it the way it is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
agree.
you guys can work out the lawyer.
Yeah, no.
But
you
it
know,
means so much. It looks so like too clear and to do all this other stuff. It just makes sense.
It isn't a matter so much. It really isn't a matter so much of lawyer speak as it is protecting our ability to create a
Right, but we do have this,
restriction.
but we do have this slope issue, which I trust,
Yeah.
I guess, is it?
I agree with
Trust.
Sharon, and because this has been in place for 66 years, this driveway,
Well, let me ask the board this.
I-
You
So,
guys-
for me, the slope, I mean, I think to me, there's enough evidence here that that other driveway doesn't work very well, the short one.
right?
So to me, that's enough. But
And because we are not necessarily married to change in circumstance, you don't
I mean,
think you need.
I understand why we use that. I mean, I'm not trying to dismiss the change of circumstance, but I do believe that the slope doesn't match our whatever, it doesn't match our codes today. And the other one has been in existence forever. And why, yeah.
So we don't need, in other words, I think what you're saying is we don't need to know whether there's a change in circumstance because it just doesn't meet the current situation. Is that, Nancy, is that troublesome for us?
I don't think so. I mean, like you would, when you think you wouldn't be having them do something that's not, if they changed it back to the common driveway, that's not in keeping with, you'd be directing them to do something that's not keeping with the current code,
Yeah.
which seems absurd.
Just to sort of say what Sharon says a little differently, I think if we use this change of circumstance excuse, we're going to force a bad situation on us just to adhere to the change of circumstance protocol. I mean, we're here to make decisions that good planning. And I think that the right decision for good planning here is to keep that short driveway.
Short driveway?
Yeah.
In other words,
The driveway that they want.
hold on, they want the long.
They want the
driveway.
longer one from the road.
Could you bring up the current
Yes.
picture?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they want that
Yeah,
They
one.
want that.
Right.
The
Yes.
existing
Yeah,
driveway.
I meant the existing
Yeah,
driveway.
yeah,
Because the short driveway is the one that takes access
yeah.
off of the common driveway.
Right, no, the
they
existing
don't want.
driveway, right.
Yeah.
So,
Sam?
Go ahead. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what my take is after hearing everybody. And also knowing that Sid Miller was the committee on this subdivision. I think the planning board at the time basically said to this person who wanted to subdivide, I guess what we know that they got another lot here and maybe 2 more of Copisi. So they got 3 new building lots. I think the planning board said, look, we know you have this existing house and we know that you have utilities going up the existing driveway, but you're asking to have 3 new lots and we like to use common driveways. So I think the planning board knew what they were doing and they wanted them to use the common driveway and relocate the utilities and everything. But if I agree with you, Sam, that if the rule changed so that, or maybe I don't even know if we need, but if the proposed short driveway doesn't meet code, and especially if it was 15 and now it's 12, I think that would satisfy me. But
And no further investigation of when things changed and when and where it was, just because of the fact that the proposal, or not the proposal, but the to comply with the old subdivision would have been to comply today with the subdivision made 35 years, whatever the hell it was ago, would require violating code today. We don't do it.
Is that what you're saying? That's a changed circumstance, but I agree with you that it would be nice to have a little more. I wonder if the engineer, if Vinny, or the town engineer might know when it was changed from 15 to 12. That would make it more solid. Yeah. Otherwise, I suppose you could just wait around until the code changed before you comply with the decision. Supposedly, this person should have switched the driveways at the time of the subdivision when before they sold all these 3 other lots, and they had plenty of money to make the change. And now we have a new owner.
Well, that's what brings it about, is that there's a new owner who wants a C of O, which is something that we shouldn't be discouraging. So,
no.
I think we have, it sounds like we have three on the board. It sounds like you have all 5 of us willing to do it, but 3 people are ready to do it right now, and 2 of us want just a little bit more meat on the bone before we do that. Do I have that?
Yeah, you have that. Right.
I'm ready to go right now.
I'm ready to go right now.
I'm ready to go right now.
It's been 66 years.
I think I think just the code change is enough for me, and we could argue that.
All right. Well, then, does the board say there's a change in circumstances?
There's a code change.
Well, we don't know that, Chair.
Well, no. I'm calling the question. That's the second time I've done it.
I'm trusting that there was a code change. Yes,
Okay.
I guess.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's on you.
But I'm willing to allow what the applicant is asking for.
There you go. 3-2. All right. Thank you very much. And so that's
simple majority, Sam?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You have 2 people recused, so it's 5 members of the board. 3 of them said yes, and 2 of them are abstaining. I'm abstaining.
We want more meat.
Abstain. I'm going to say no.
We want more meat on the bone.
Yeah, well, those of us who are lean and mean are going to exceed. All right. Rick has made a hasty exit.
Let that be noted.
Oh, no. That is,
I heard 3-2.
that's it. You're out the door. You know, I use a pocket calendar when I'm in court because that way everybody else, when the judge says, all right, they always like, and I just take out my book, write it in, I'm out the door. So, all right, on to Muse Restaurant. Let me ask you a question. Should we do Muse and then Muse 2, or should we do them as one, or what's your pleasure?
They are two separate applications.
Mhm.
There's a lot of common issues. So if you like, I can take us.
Yeah, they are different. And you know, it occurs to me also, we have two different members of the board who are
And I'm
responsible.
going second. I'll honor all those early conversations and
There
try
you
to
go.
get to the point.
Okay, so we have you and we have Mr. Hammer, and we're ready to go. Go ahead.
Okay. So you want me to go separate?
Yeah, one at a time.
Okay. This is the site plan.
I'm sorry?
Ed is signing back in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Ed was back with us already.
Site plan application for Muse
Hold on,
Restaurant.
Tina, I'm sorry. Ed, are you on?
Ed, you're silent.
I can't see Ed. Is he shaking his head?
Yeah, we
Ed is on. He's just muted.
All right. Somehow somebody let Ed know that we're on to the next application. I think when he sees the picture of Montauk, he'll know. All right. Go ahead.
Okay, this is the site plan application for Muse Restaurant. It's an existing restaurant in downtown Montauk. I'm just zooming in on where it is. It is an application to legalize several structures that have already been built, accessory structures. The project is a type 2 pursuant to SECRA, therefore no further SECRA review is required. Regarding the issues in the planning department report, the first section goes through the dimensional conformance. This is an existing building that seems to be built prior to zoning. And they're looking for accessory structures in setback areas. In the CB zone where this is located, the setbacks are 10 feet for accessory structures, and the planning board does have the authority to modify those setbacks during site plan review if they think it's appropriate based on the criteria that I included in the memo. The structures that the applicant is requesting to be legalized include the frame shed in the back rear yard, freezer storage, an additional shed on the, freezer on the eastern side of the property. And then in the front of the property, the roof overhang. I estimated some of the setbacks and some the applicant provided. Just one of the overarching comments is that the applicant's materials should be labeled a little more clearly to allow, when they're asking for, setback waivers from the planning board, they should be very crisp about the precise distances that they're proposing to adhere to. These structures all seem to be existing based on the site visit conducted by the planning department. Regarding the structures in the rear yard, this is adjacent to an alleyway that serves adjacent commercial uses, and it's currently surrounded by a stockade fence that really shields these structures from view. And it's not a sensitive location in the alley. Nevertheless, the setbacks that the applicant is requesting are really pretty significant. These structures are, like a foot away from the rear yard line, another 1.5 feet. So they're really right up against the property lines in a lot of locations. We also just noted that the building coverage is well beyond what's allowed by the code, as is the lot coverage. Again, that's really a pre-existing condition, but it warrants consideration here. And that these structures, again, were all already built, and they seem to have been in place for quite some time. So they've been kind of there, not on the CO, not legalized. The next section of the report talks about the front of the property. There is a, what's labeled here, sorry, as a concrete patio in the front of the property that extends beyond the applicant's property line. So the property line here is this kind of dark area I'm trying to hover over. And the applicant has a fence that kind of exceeds the property line boundaries, as well as this concrete area in the front of the facility. And I'm going to just zoom in and just show, what this looks like. These lot lines and the GIS aren't, as precise as the ones on the survey, but this gives you an idea of where the property line ends and the street right of way begins. And, if you go back some years, you can see that at different times, there could have been a sidewalk or other public infrastructure here. It's not entirely clear, but it does look like there may have been. And in the memo, we did include a photo of what seems to be an existing sidewalk that was here at one point. So basically, the planning department's not aware of the applicant having formal permission for the structures associated with the private business in the town's right of way. If they wanted to formalize that, my understanding is that they would need approval from the town board. And absent that, our recommendation would be that the sidewalk would need to be restored in accordance with the town standards, because it is public right of way. Just a couple of notes on the survey. Recognizing that everything here really is existing, it still would be helpful if the applicant was very clear on if there's anything that's not built that they're requesting approval for. It does seem like everything is built, but there was a little bit of ambiguity. So we'd like that cleaned up and just make sure that we're very clear on what's existing and approved versus what's proposed and going to be built if the planning board would approve the application. For further issues that the planning board usually considers, there was not a lot of information included in the application. So there was no information on sanitary systems currently serving the property, stormwater facilities currently serving the property. Regarding fire protection, the occupancy of the building wasn't provided, but obviously the fire marshal will be reviewing this as part of site plan review. I'm sure they're going to want that information and comments from them regarding fire protection and ADA accessibility are going to be forthcoming. The other thing I'll note is that, this is an existing restaurant. It is a restaurant on the CO. There is no parking. So, and because the occupancy wasn't provided, we don't know what the parking demand would be. So usually that's something I would present, but I don't have that. So it would be helpful to have that information so we can really understand how this facility interacts with the neighborhood it's located in. Landscaping is another thing that would be considered during site plan review. There's really no space here. There are some potted plants. I don't know if there's any other opportunities. We did throw that out there. There are some large propane tanks in the back. They're not on the site plan. I'm sure the fire marshal will comment on those if there's anything that needs to be addressed with their storage. Just figured we'd note it, and the applicant should make sure that everything is safe and in accordance with all applicable regulations. The lighting plan, we put information that needs to be enhanced in the application so we can fully review it pursuant to the planning board standards. I won't belabor that point. And that's it. The application's really incomplete pending the additional information.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Very thorough report again. Mr. Hammond.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to try and be brief on this thing. I commend Tina for a very thorough application. I'm going to tell you why a lot of what she's asking for just doesn't matter here. This Muse restaurant, I believe, was built in the 70s, maybe the early 70s. For the record, site plan approval was not required in Montauk. I'm going to repeat this. Site plan approval was not required in Montauk before 1981. I don't know why. That's just the way the code is. There's an asterisk in the code. Site plan approval is not required in Montauk, downtown map 171 or whatever. Basically, Montauk was a Wild West back then. This restaurant was developed. staffed, everything in accordance with the town code as it existed at the time. It's completely grandfathered. The lack of parking, I have no idea what the thinking was. However, I will tell you, until recently, Montauk had no parking issues. Even when I first moved out to Montauk, it wasn't a big deal, but it is grandfathered. I'm not going to provide you seating and septic and all. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here for some very minor accessory structures. If you look at the CO, and there's a copy of the CO survey in your thing, we're replacing an existing large shed that used to have the walk-ins and the freezers and whatnot with two smaller buildings in that same, more or less the same location. That shed was like, I don't know, 8 inches off the property line. This is going to be maybe even a little bit more conforming, but it's not really a change per se. It's just those freezers failed. That's the way it used to exist. Let's see if you can get to the CO survey.
So this is the survey that you guys submitted, and it's like exactly the same as the site plan. That's what was.
But where's the CO
the
survey?
CO, which
I think it is
attached to my
attached.
memo, doesn't show.
Yeah, it does. It shows a large building in the back, which was the shed that is essentially in the, let's see.
That was great content. We'll just go.
Wait, I think that was it right
Oh,
there.
yeah, the shed, right.
Yeah. So there's the shed. That's the CO survey that was issued. The other thing you're going to see is that concrete patio was part of the CO. I believe that was added, I don't know, 1970 or whatever. And the reason it was probably added, I know for a fact that the site plan next door, the paving that became part of the road right-of-way was required as part of the site plan. That's what, so they expanded the road right-of-way by adding that paving. Same thing with that concrete. I don't know what it was there for in 1973, but maybe it is part of a sidewalk, but it's a sidewalk that leads nowhere. These are very tiny lots at 4,000 square feet, probably couldn't support a restaurant today and probably wouldn't be good planning. However, this restaurant has been there the whole time. The other thing I want to mention, the covered area that we're asking for approval for, in 1973, the health department didn't really regulate things. Nowadays, if you have freezers and walk-ins outside, I call it the bird poop rule. You can't walk from a freezer to your restaurant without having some kind of overhead coverage. And that is specifically to prevent birds from pooping into it. So there is a covered walkway that protects the ability to walk from that freezer to it. That's part of what we're asking for approval for. Could it be done via a temporary tent? Yeah, I suppose it could be. But at the end of the day, does it really matter? I'm happy to meet with Tina to go over the fencing and how that is. I will say that I'm very familiar with this site. That alleyway services Grimes Land Design. I think Mickey has a building back there, but it's not like they're all used in concert with one another. This restaurant probably predates most of their existence at the end of the day, and it doesn't seem like there's any conflict the way they run their site with the other properties. I can't really ascertain what the legally existing coverage was. If you look at that site plan survey, you see a building that's on the property line, and then you see a shed that's on the property line. Was there coverage in between? I almost guarantee there was concrete. That survey's from 1993. We didn't locate things like that in 1993, but I would assume we probably had 100% coverage in 1993. We have close to 100% coverage today, but I don't know how to recreate that based on the information that's available to us. There's just no information that would allow me to reasonably do that. I would say that it's also probably pretty obvious if you walk around Montauk. Pretty much most of Montauk has CB lots that predate zoning, at least in that downtown area. I can't think of one that probably has less than 100% coverage. It just doesn't seem possible to me if you're familiar with the area. The other thing is the sidewalk, and I put the sidewalk in quotes. When this was built in 1973 or whatever, that front area that we're calling a patio was a concrete area. The concrete, you can go there and look at it. It's it's the same concrete that's been there since 1970s or whatever. Is it a sidewalk? I usually think of a sidewalk as a conveyance that will lead me somewhere. If you try to walk to the left on this property or to the west, you run into nothing. There's no sidewalk that connects it. As a matter of fact, that's Jimmy Grimes has his landscape material. Truthfully, I don't even know whose fence, when you say we have a wall that projects in, I can't remember if that's even associated with this property or the adjacent landscape property. But even if you remove that, there's like stones, small boulders. If you go there, you couldn't walk that way anyway on the site. You see where you're walking into trees, and there's a post and rail fence in front of that also it projects out. So it's not a sidewalk that leads anywhere. If you try to walk the other way, this is where it gets very interesting. You walk across the adjacent building, which we're going to talk about next, and then you come to about a 2-foot drop on the adjacent property, which was a recently approved, recently built, and I think recently CO'd property that got site plan approval. There's a 2-foot gap in the sidewalk. So it goes from here down to, basically you'd fall and kill yourself. I don't understand how sidewalks that should walk up, match up, don't match up. There's another one in Montauk right now that maybe Tina's even aware of that's going on the corner that, we've been involved in. Same thing. Grades changed. It looks like maybe they excavated to build that site. There's no way to get the two things to match up. There's no way that I know of to make them handicapped accessible if you were to try and correct it, because the grade is too different. Look at that. It's about 18 inches. As a matter of fact, the paving stones make it better because that sidewalk is still underneath those paving stones. I know that for a fact. Probably those paving stones it would be even a larger gap to try to get over to that property. It's basically a dangerous situation. For the last several years, the town board has allowed outdoor dining in the road right-of-way, including on this property. This area was used in the road as part of the outdoor dining permit. Our intention is not to seek site plan approval for any of the improvements seaward of or for use of it. We can't ask you. You don't have the authority to give me site plan approval. That is what the outdoor dining regulations are about. And if the town board, the fire marshal, and the other regulatory bodies say, hey, yes, we can use it. I know they have approved the use of temporary pavers in the past, but that's outside of your purview. So I'm going to cut everything back to this property and what you're going to be getting, what we're asking for actual site plan approval for on our next submission.
I don't think that the outdoor dining program contemplates permanent structures in the right of way, as I would consider like concrete or concrete pavers.
Those are pavers you can lift up. And actually,
temporary structures?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've had them approved at several sites where it was unsuitable for use, and the town board said, you know what? We'll allow temporary pavers to be placed, but those are pavers you can lift up. They're not set in concrete. And on this site,
I thought you
that
said they
concrete
were there in the CO from.
Oh no, you're talking about two different sites. The pavers are on this site right there.
Okay.
On the Muse site, that poured concrete is the same poured concrete that's been there for 40 years. If you go and look at that, right where those plants are sitting, that gray is the concrete that is the original concrete. I've had Rob McMaster or Dave McMaster on the site with me, and he can confirm that we looked at it. That paving that we added, there used to be some kind of a landscaped wall in front of it. My client had put planter boxes. We removed it all and then restored the paving, but that probably once again dated back to the 70s. It was a long time that it had been there, but it's now restored back to where you have concrete in front of this building. That is shown on the CO, and that asphalt looks new because we added it just to kind of restore the area back to where the town deemed it to be appropriate.
Tina, was there anything besides the pavers that you're thinking of as being permanent?
The concrete in front of this building, certainly, and.
But it's on the CO, isn't it on the CO?
I just.
So it is in the town right of way, and just because it's on the CO, I still don't know that counts as town authorization to utilize the spot as a part of a private business.
What else is permanent? I mean, other than the pavers or the concrete?
Right. Well, the pavers, you're saying they're temporary. Are they periodically removed?
They can be. But that's not even on this site. So that's.
No, I know, but we're talking about both now, kind of.
I just want to get a sense of when you say the things are permanent versus temporary, because the regulations, I think, contemplate, bring out the chairs, bring back the chairs, bring out the tables, bring back the tables.
Yeah, so structural improvements are limited to removable things, gravel, flagstone, surfacing materials that don't have concrete.
Flagstone is the same thing as a paving stone.
Yeah, no.
But at risk of wasting time, I mean, we're not going to approve anything not on the site.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to bring it. We're going to dial it right back to the property. I will tell you that I know definitively that on that building next door, The paving and the sidewalk and the curbing were installed by this person who did the site plan, which was a guy named Arthur Trafari. That was part of the site plan. He was required to add the paving, the sidewalk, and the curbing on that. So they were not there. It was just dirt in front of this property.
I didn't want to get too far.
Yeah,
I
so
just
we're
wanted to get a
mixing
sense of what
properties.
Well, I do, but I think
There was
that
a
would make sense
sidewalk.
here because that concrete in front of this building was probably approved as in 1973 because it was added as, it would be consistent with what happened next door is what I'm saying is it's not a town improvement. It's required to be
I
added
don't
to
want
the
to
right
bleed
way.
into the next door. So do you have anything else on this one?
Okay. Seating, this is just for minor accessory structures. The seating's not changing. I'm not proposing to add seating, remove seating. I can tell you that the health department permit has this grandfathered at 105 seats. I believe the fire marshal has a little bit higher occupancy. Maybe it's 110 seats. And I believe that the actual occupancy of the site's considered to be 99 because if you go above 100, I think you need sprinklers. So, but that's not really relevant to this application. We're talking about some minor accessory structures. That's it. Same with the stormwater calculations. I don't know what stormwater was required in 1973. Maybe there was none. I'm happy to add stormwater calculations for anything that this board deems likely they're going to approve, but you cannot say, oh, well, now you have to collect the stormwater for the entire site. We're talking about a tiny little thing. There's no nexus between stormwater collection. Frankly, I don't think you could do it on this property. It's 4,000 square feet. And where are you going to put a 10-foot dry well, 5-foot? It's probably not going to fit on this site, and it wouldn't have fit before I asked for permission for anything anyway. On the lighting, it's been my observation the town has never required the detailed photometric data that you see in the code. As a matter of fact, it just became so cumbersome. I work with Eric Shantz on a lot of these lighting plans. Very few have we ever been able to find somebody who can calculate it. So you basically go get a $40 fixture at Home Depot and spend $3,000 to get photometric data. What we try to do is make sure that all the fixtures we're proposing, including string lighting, are fully shielded, compliant fixtures. I can get you the foot candles. I'm going to get you as much information as I can, but the code is always provided for this onerous foot candle diagram. I don't even know anybody out here who can do it. I did it once in my career, but in the past, and Tara unfortunately isn't here tonight. She can speak to it probably with more authority than I can, but it's just very onerous to do, and we'll get you as much information as we can. But if we use all compliant fixtures, we put them in locations that meet the lighting code in terms of the certain number of feet high, they're not going to be more than 60 watts or whatever. That's usually been deemed sufficient for the planning board. So I just wanted to bring that issue up. This site is zone CB. It's surrounded by CB zone and CB used property. So this isn't a residential zone where we're going to have a lot of light spill. You have street lights right across the street that are designed to light the area. So, it seems to make sense that if you're going to have any area that gets a little more light, the downtown CB districts are the ones that seem to be most appropriate as opposed to, NB or some of the other residential zones. That's all I have to say on this one. And I'm happy to give you as much information as I can, but I'm going to draw the line at, I'm not talking about seating. I'm not talking about parking. I'm not talking about drain water. I'm not talking about septic. You have some of the information. It's all in the CO. I have no way to locate what that is other than hire an engineer, come out and sound it out. Hey, it's right on the CO. So, and generally surveyors don't like to say, well, I'll put that from that CO onto my thing because then there's going to be a big disclaimer and it won't follow under their liability. Basically, I just want a couple of accessory structures, two of which are replacing a big accessory structure and some extra coverage that we can talk about and figure out. That's actually a zoning board issue more than yours. But I think probably in terms of overall coverage, probably about the same. I just can't prove it to you. And maybe I couldn't disprove it to you either at the end of the day because it's such an old site.
Thanks. Luke.
Yeah. So just starting off with a positive note, I'll get to the items that I have an issue with. I think with regard to the setbacks, I agree that with the stockade fence, although you're right up against the shed, the freezer, all that stuff in the back is right up against the perimeter of the property. I don't think it bothers anybody. That stockade fence pretty much covers it all. On the other side of it is Grimes Landscaping. It's just a sort of an alleyway drive-through. I don't think it's going to bother anybody. So if it was only that, I don't think I'd have a problem relaxing those setback restrictions. But I take issue with what you said, that this was approved back in 1974, whenever it was, and it's grandfathered, and it was the Wild West and everything was allowed. But that's true. I mean, back then, all you had was Luigi's Restaurant, which is this restaurant. You had the Pizza Village and you had Shagwan. That was it. Now you have dozens of restaurants. You have so many more people, and we have to try to maintain some of the zoning code requirements for the betterment, the health, and good planning of this town, Montauk. So I take issue with the front. And Tina, would you bring up that photograph that Andy was trying to demonstrate, that drop, that 3-foot drop that occurs in the sidewalk?
Sure.
I want to make another point. I'm not.
Yep,
concerned
that's
with
just
the
next
drop.
door at the other location.
Yeah.
News.
Yeah, I know it's with the other location, but I just want to make a point about this location. Okay, so that new building, which is on the other side of that plant, east of those plants there, those planters, that's a sidewalk, that pink sidewalk there. And then right after the sidewalk, you have the right of way. Notice that the patio in this would be the other property, Muse, we're referring to it as Muse 2. But that patio is has the same coverage as Muse 1, the property that we're discussing now. So my point is that that patio extends 4.5 feet into the right of way. Now, you can't, it was the Wild West back in the early 70s. We can't have Wild West today. You can't just have and listen, I'm all for the restaurant beautifying the area, trying to maximize the space that they have and provide a restaurant service to the community. I'm all for that. But you can't just go ahead and do whatever you want without getting approval. And that's what I think happened here.
Just to address, I agree with you on that. I didn't say I would condemn or condone them putting these patios in. As a matter of fact, I'll tell them to take them out. It's just not you who can tell them that. It's the town board, basically, that will say, get rid of those pavers. However, the patio that you see there, that sidewalk would more or less line up with the sidewalk that is currently existing underneath those paving stones. If you lifted them up, it's just unusable to connect them because it's several feet of grade difference.
But you made that decision on your own. That's all I'm saying.
I certainly didn't make any decision on this, and I'm happy to tell them to take it off, but that's not
Anyway,
with this
I just
board.
wanted to make that point.
So, and just to that point, in 2021, there was a sidewalk in front of this location that you're talking about. So you're saying the sidewalk still exists under the pavers?
Yeah. So, okay. And going to the rear, I walked in the rear there. Again, I don't have a problem with the setbacks. I could relax those setback requirements. And I really want to wait for the fire department inspection because I can't see, it didn't seem like a safe spot back there in the back with those huge gas tanks sitting there, the freezer next to the shed. It just, I'm not an expert, but I look forward to seeing what the fire department inspection shows. And the other thing is the septic system. Now you say you don't need to provide any information about the septic system. Well, I think you do, because one of the items in the site plan review, no matter what you are in for on the site plan, is septic. And if you have a large capacity cesspool, that's illegal. You need to upgrade. So we need to know what kind of septic system you have.
The septic is provided. It's on the CO. That's the health department survey that shows the CO.
Capacity cesspool.
No, I don't believe so. It has it's a 2-pool system. It's but it's part of the town record already. If you flip to the next page, boom, there's your health department approval on it.
What year is that?
1992.
Yeah, well,
So that's not a large capacity cesspool. That is a septic tank, grease trap, and leach field.
Did it say that? I can't read it from here.
What we don't know is what the
Yes, it
capacity
says
was
it right there.
then.
5,000 gallon septic tank, 12 foot by 9 foot. So that meets health department specs for the 105 seats that are grandfathered in.
Okay, but I need to know if it's a working septic system. I mean, is that the only county approval certificate that is available, or can we get something that's more recent?
Well, that was our question. And, in reviewing this, when a site plan is typically submitted, everything is looked at, right? And if we have these sites that are non-compliant and we know that they were built before zoning and they possibly have all these issues, and if we're having a very narrow view of them, we are always going to have these sites here that are very out of compliance and so forth. So in asking for this information, we're trying to make sure that we are not, continuing to kind of look the other way when things may be out of compliance. In this case, the building was here. I don't know if the capacity was the same at the time this was issued. So we were asking for, information that confirms that the septic system is still suitable for what's on site.
Right. So
Today.
what you're saying, I think, is what I was thinking is that if somebody comes in for site plan review, it can't be, we're just looking for setback, relax the setbacks in the back. Don't look at anything else on this property. Don't look at the front, that it's going into the right of way. Don't look at the fact that the overhang is extending beyond the property line. Don't look at the fact that it's probably in violation of fire department standards. Don't look at all septic systems. Don't look at all these things, even though they may be subpar, substandard. Don't look at it. We're just coming in front of you for this. So, I don't mean to be a hard ass, but, that's the way the system works. And I don't want to, be against business of, make it more difficult for the owners. I understand they're trying to make make a business work, but we also have our job to do, and our job is to have a full site plan review and cover each and every item.
But and I think Sam might be able to counsel, and your counsel can talk to you. If I restore it to what it looked like in the CO, you guys have no regulatory authority to look at this. I will say, having a 1992 health department approval that shows a septic system that's compliant in 1992 in Montauk, that's a hallelujah moment compared to a lot of, most of the other sites from the 50s or whatever. That's actually a fairly recent sanitary approval. I'm not hiding anything. It's there in front of you. It's right on the CO that was issued. So, these are legally existing and totally authorized uses. What I'm asking you for permission is for the accessory structures. That's it. And the scope of the review, I think by law, is required to have a nexus. So if you're going to ask for septic engineer, it has to have a nexus to what's there. And I'm willing to work with you. I'm just telling you the way that this has to proceed is I'm asking for small accessory structures. If I strip them off, restore it to the CO, I don't get any review. So we have to come out in a happy place, which is, hey, what can we do that's better for everybody on this site?
That's all I have.
Okay. Anybody else on this?
Yeah, I largely agree with Lou in that I don't think the accessory structures out back are a big deal in the zoning district and in the location that they are. I do think the applicant should provide stormwater drainage for any new structures that are being put in place. It sounds like you're willing to do that. I understand why you wanted to have an idea of what would be required before you engineer it. And I think, we just can't approve something on town property, which I'm happy to hear the applicant recognizes. I think the only question on the front is, we have been requiring sidewalks up there, and typically that is part of the site plan. So I don't know where that falls. But certainly we're not going to approve something where you're blatantly on town land. I don't know if you want to work it out with the town where you get permission, at which point, that would affect our decision. But if we just take that part out of it entirely, you're gonna have a hard time getting the CO probably if that doesn't get taken out, and I think that. As far as the septic, I share Lou's concerns about high capacity cesspools, but I do think you showed a modern system. And I agree with the applicant at that point. If you're not increasing flow and you have a valid permit that's, from health department, that's not a large capacity cesspool, I don't know what we could do about it. So that's where I stand.
Anyone else? Sure, Michael? Randy, you got anything?
No, I pretty much back Lou up on all his comments. I think we do have to acknowledge that map 174 in Montauk is now a legacy issue for the current taxpayers in East Hampton, in that, there's a pretty major sewage system proposed in Montauk, largely to deal with the downtown, that doesn't really take care of its own sewage. So anyway, I don't think I have anything new to add, but unless these two buildings are next to each other, what about the idea of them combining and becoming more conforming? That might be something that would be good for everybody.
Well, that's a different conversation than today's. Ed, do you have anything?
I don't think I can add anything to what's already been said. I share the same concerns.
Yeah. All right, well, that makes it pretty much unanimous. I'm going to run through the questions. Lou, thank you. That was a very comprehensive and incisive review. Does the planning board find the placement of structures in the rear of property and the correlating need to waive setbacks acceptable?
Yes.
Yes.
Does the planning board agree the applicant requires formal approval for use of town right-of-way or must restore right-of-way areas to conditions acceptable to the town?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course. Yes.
Okay. Does the planning board agree the applicant should clarify its survey and plans as requested above? Yes, all around?
Yes.
Should the applicant submit sanitary systems information?
Well, what was that? The last one I think has some detail, right?
Well, yeah,
In terms of what we're asking.
well, it refers back to the two prior questions, basically. So if they do that, then they'll meet the third. Should the applicant submit sanitary systems information? Yes, all around?
Yeah.
Anyone disagree with that?
What, the sanitary information?
I think they have,
Yeah.
no, they have,
I mean, I think if they show a health department permit that,
It's not
somebody can tell me
high
I'm wrong and I might be, but that sure looked like a modern system to me.
Mhm.
And once they demonstrate it's not a high capacity cesspool, I don't know what
Well, that's, I think, about as far as we can take it.
that's what I would think.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's just good for us to remember that 105 seat restaurant on 4,000 square foot lot would never have a chance of being approved today.
I don't think anybody ever forgot that. It's just a question. A lot of times it's where is the approval? We're looking at it.
The health department goes with their grandfathering system.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, there's a public restroom across the street, but should the applicant submit information on occupancy to facilitate understanding the site's parking demand and to facilitate fire marshal review?
I would separate that out,
I mean,
right?
I agree with you on that.
But just the fire review, but not the
Yeah,
rest.
I agree with you on that, Sharon.
Yeah.
So we don't want occupancy information, thank you. Not for parking demand, but for the fire marshal, correct?
Right.
Board?
Yes. I think that's right.
Should the applicant submit information on stormwater infrastructure serving the site? Anyone?
I think they should show that they're going to contain the runoff from any additional structures.
Okay,
Mhm.
I agree with that.
The applicants pretty much agreed to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Should the applicant submit a lighting plan that includes the required information? Are we gonna do that?
Do the best you
We're
can.
gonna do the best you can. Well, it all depends on what you call
I
required.
think if they show compliance in the way we typically
Yeah.
accept, but that'll be, I think, work out with the planning department.
Okay, well, let's move on to site plan number 2. Use 2.
Okay, this property is right next door. The address is, I always get this confused, I might have to stop, 43 South Euclid Avenue as opposed to 41. Again, same scope. Applicant is proposing to legalize a lot of structures that have already been built. For this, we did find a historical site plan approval, so we'll go through that when we get there. Again, same thing. It's for accessory structures in the rear setback. The listing in the memo kind of includes the structures that need new dimensional relief. So the stone pavers in the front of the facility, these extend, you can see the property line here. The pergola also appears to be outside. Hold on.
No, I think it's,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
this is the line, right?
it was cut back to the pergola's like a foot inside.
The pergola needs relief here from the front yard and the side yard, but it's not on town property. But the stone pavers exceed the property line, which is shown here. There's a shed in the back, western property line, very close to the side yard, and another shed right here. The dimension isn't on this drawing, but it does look like it's closer than 10 feet, but just a small bit. So there's also a gravel parking area shown here, as well as a refuse enclosure. Same issues. This is in the same alleyway. That is not a sensitive resource to what these facilities look like. In this case, the garbage and the gravel parking are outside the current fence line. And the wood fence includes, and planters includes this area, which is kind of like an outdoor dining in the rear yard. But this fence encloses the garbage area to kind of screen that from view in the alley. Again, this is building coverage that actually complies with the standard in the CB zone. It is below by a good amount, but the total coverage is well beyond what's allowed in the code, and it's pre-existing. It's a legal use. So again, the pavers, the applicant is proposing these stone pavers on sand, which exists right now. In this case, we understand that there was a sidewalk that was here. You can see this is the aerial imagery from 2021. And then by 2022, the sidewalk was gone. The applicant stated that the sidewalk is still existing underneath the pavers, which seems like an easy fix to restore if they don't have permission to utilize town property. I do understand, and I don't have the detail, but I do believe that code enforcement and fire marshal have been to these locations, so there may be 1 or 2 violations associated with these facilities, but I'm not sure which site it's on. But again, absent formal approval to have structures in the town right of way, we don't feel these are appropriate. As they look more permanent to me than just being easy to remove. And if they don't have permission to be there, then the sidewalk that was there should be restored in accordance with sound standards, or if they could just be lifted up, that's a pretty easy fix. There's new fencing throughout the property. Seems to be, I'm gonna go back to the site plan. Seems to be 5.6 feet, which is compliant for the most part. Wasn't really clearly labeled, so we just want to confirm that what the fence heights are, and that ARB approval is also obviously going to be required for those. We want to confirm too. There's this site plan showed 2 lots, 15.1 and 15.2. I believe 15.2 was back here and has been transferred to the town as a road widening easement, but it just wasn't clearly shown that way, so the plans could be cleared up. On a recent site visit, we noted that there appeared to be only 1 retail use, so the applicant, we're asking just to clarify, what are the uses and types on site. We believe the CO has 2 uses here. There seems to only be 1, and they're not specified what kind. It does look like there might be some kind of wet use, like takeout. If it's operational, which I couldn't tell, that is allowed as a retail use in the town code, but it's helpful to understand what's going on in the site when you're doing a site plan review. Parking, We were able to find a site plan approval from 2001 that indicated the site had been approved with 4 spaces, which I'm assuming would have been back here. The applicant should just clarify if they're going to fit 4 spaces here, consistent with that site plan, or if they're asking for something different. The parking requirement for this, based on the size of the retail use, would have been 8 spaces. And I think they paid fees in lieu at the time. That's what the site plan approval said. Again, no information on sanitary systems was provided. So we don't know, whatever is historical, if that's changed or if it's still suitable for what's going on. No information on stormwater was provided. So we don't have information on that. The landscape plan has planters. The placement of those looks appropriate. The site looks, it enhances the look of the site, the types of species, and the planning board should just confirm that they're okay with where everything is placed. Again, fire protection comments haven't been received and will be forthcoming. We did ask for the site same thing survey just be updated with a little bit more clear information on the precise setbacks and therefore the waivers that are going to be requested, and make it very clear what's existing and proposed. And then the lighting plan, I agree that the photometric plan may not always be required if it's not possible to provide, but something a little more comprehensive that includes most of the information we need so we can at least make a better informed judgment of the site lighting. And that concludes the comments there.
Thanks very much again for a thorough report. Ma'am.
I'll be brief on this one too.
Like last time?
Exactly. Compared to the first one, I'm killing it right now. Just so you know, this is the health department approval for this site. It was a site plan approved. I think it was Gilbert Titel was the name of the site plan. It was built by a guy named Arthur Trafari. Arthur Trafari built, it's a beautiful building. I remember appearing in front of the ARB and whatnot. This building was sold to a guy who is me. I owned this building for several years and operated it, or I leased it to Buddha Berry Yogurt was the actual use here. That rear area, it was approved with 16 outdoor seats by the health department. That's just the way the health department approves things. There were little tables back there. It was not an outdoor dining area. It was just used. There is currently no tenant in there. There's always only been one retail use in there. Right now, there is no retail use in there. The reason I got rid of the building is COVID hit. I stopped getting paid rent. I couldn't afford to own the building anymore. So I'm happy to not be a landlord at this point in my life. It turned out it wasn't all it's cracked up to be, unless you're really, that's your continence. In any event, so I know a lot of it. They were not proposing to change the use from retail. There was no such thing as takeout food store when this was approved. It's a retail use, but the health department approval, I'll just give this to Tina. I'll submit all this stuff, but it does show that there was a grease trap installed. So I think Arthur had prepared this to be a wet store in any event. There's also, you can see on the surveys, the sidewalk that was put in. Arthur Trafari put the sidewalk in and paved the front of this site, which is now covered up in pavers. I agree. I don't know why anybody would put that amount of pavers in on the town right away without any approval. But hey, if the town board tells me to take rid, I'll be the first person, hey, get rid of that stuff. However, in terms of up to the sidewalk, it's actually a better surface than the sidewalk ever was, in terms of its durability and whatnot. It's a better surface. Maybe that would be something that you guys would look favorably on is, hey, why don't we keep that instead of the sidewalk? But we'll talk about that as we get a little further down the road. The sidewalk, that's the one that I'm scratching myself. How do you have 2 sidewalks that are 2 feet apart? And it just doesn't make sense. This sidewalk was existing when they built that site next door, and it doesn't match up. There's no way that you can go with a wheelchair or a stroller or anything down that sidewalk. It's just impossible. And that's something that I think the town needs to take a close look at and say, hey, if we're going to have walking pedestrian things, shouldn't there be somebody that says, hey, these things should line up at some point? It just makes sense to me. But, it was vacant the whole time that I had it. As a matter of fact, I believe it was used. Jimmy Grimes used to lease that, and he had all his plants and kind of that alleyway before it was developed. The coverages that were proposed on the original site plan, I think it was 73%. The CO survey doesn't calculate them, but it looks like I'm going to need a coverage variance. That's not really in front of this board's purview, but we're going to tone it down, remove what we can. And then if I have to go to the zoning board, I will. I will say the difference in coverage probably is gravel, like gravel areas. There was some planted areas on these things, but it's so slight on these CB lots. And I don't know that you can say, oh, there's a difference between coverage and not coverage when you're talking about 2 or 3 foot areas adjacent to buildings that maybe now have pavers, but before used to have dirt or stone on it. As a matter of fact, I will say that it's more attractive now with the pergola than it was when I owned the property. I think it actually is an improvement. The pergola originally was extended further out. I made, first thing I said is cut everything back to the property line. So that pergola has been shortened, but it really is kind of a nice entranceway. There's a handicapped accessible ramp under that. It doesn't interfere with it. And, you know, if there's any issues with access, I'm certainly happy to address them. Once again, this is pretty much a site plan for minor accessory structures. Same with the stormwater calculations from the other site. I think there is stormwater, attenuation on site. It was a fairly recent site plan, 1999, and it was built, it was inspected, approved by ARB and whatnot. So in any event, everything should be there. Any change to that site, we're happy to accommodate. The reason that the area was improved, this was used for outdoor dining last year pursuant to a dining permit that was issued by the town. Granted, things were a little different under COVID. They were more willing to accommodate things. And the restaurant next door it's really, I don't know, 2 feet off the property line. It really didn't have an attractive area to have outdoor dining, but there's never been any outdoor dining on the rear of this property. It's always been a separate and distinct property. The first time there was any dining on this was last year after the owner purchased them both. Same thing with the lighting. This has more string lighting that is now proposed to be, they actually make code compliant string lighting. It looks like little bells or something. And there's some walkway lighting down that go, I think there's solar that go on it. And we provided that. I'll get you as much information as I can. But once again, when this was operated, you could walk from the front to the back down that little walkway. It made sense to have it lit. And the only other way you could light it is by having light coming through the windows or doors on that site. So it's probably a more attractive option and probably provides safer access lighting at the end of the day. That's pretty much it I have for this site. And you know what I plan to do is take all your comments. I'll meet with Tina, pull up some more info, and try to get this pared down to something that I think is reasonable. And also, we have our outdoor dining permit application in. And if the town board says, "Oh no, you only get to use your property," that's the answer to 80% of the questions you have here. The rest of it, and you know, as I said, the sidewalk will end in front of the site next door because there's no way to continue it. It's basically it's a landscape company, and I think there's fencing that is in front of it, but at the end of the day, there's really no reason to have a sidewalk extend further to the west on that property anyway.
Okay, that's it.
That's it.
Okay, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I think this really is similar to the last application. I think you just gave us a little bit of color as to how it's been used and will be used. I think we should formalize that in writing with a short narrative. You do have to demonstrate the 4 parking spaces that you are required to have. Again, we can't approve anything in the front off of your property, so we won't. This sidewalk, in theory, should make more sense than the other property because it lines up to another sidewalk, or should. And I agree with the applicant that it's a little embarrassing, actually, that we have this happen a few times where sidewalks don't match the grades. And I think we should make sure we're careful about that in the future and figure out why that's happened. Along those lines, though, as part of site plan, we often do talk about sidewalks. I wonder if this wouldn't be an opportunity for you to look into making that grade work. I think at the bare minimum, you have to restore it to where the sidewalk existed as approved. Unfortunately, if that means there's that 18-inch drop off, still not a great situation.
So, yeah, I want to go back to the picture here because there is a curb that looks.
That's it.
Right. Oh, sorry. Just trying to zoom in for everybody and then I lost it. Hold on. Right here. Right. So.
Mm-hmm.
That was poured by the applicant.
Right.
And restored, and actually they put that ramp so that you could have handicap accessibility into this property. Although it was not like that before. And I think they did that after talking to the highway department. They thought that was a good idea, is to have, hey, you should have a ramp up. But that change in grade, I will tell you, if we restore our sidewalk exactly the way it was, there's no way we can match up with, we would have to raise grade on our site by 2 foot.
There'd have to be like ramps.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
ramps
Is that not a realistic possibility?
to make these match up.
It's not really 2 feet. I mean, it's not safe, but
14 inches,
I
I'd
would
say at least.
Yeah, like 18 inches.
But once I take those pavers, you're dropping down another 2 to 3 inches, right? They're probably like this big.
But I think the real question is, can you slope on
that's
the westerly property?
To do it for handicapped accessibility, my understanding is that the slope that they allow would put the terminus of the ramp.
it might create an impediment to getting
into this building.
Yeah.
The access to the doorway?
Yeah.
You might be right, and then we just are left with an unfortunate situation. I think the bare minimum, you have to restore it to what was approved, which I think you're right, doesn't make a ton of sense, but it makes more sense to me than letting you have dining in the right of way without approval. So,
Well, there is no dining in the right of way right now, just so you know. There's no outdoor dining on this site.
or any using the right of way. But,
Yeah, and so that's a town board issue.
So, but it's
While you're on this, do you mind if I ask a question about
yes. No, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, the other building, 45,
41, right?
45 is Megron Realty that has the
yeah,
higher.
that one.
Yeah,
That one which has the sidewalk.
yeah.
And remember, we were talking when that came in front of us about the right of way, whether there was enough room there for a car to go up against the sidewalk, and whether that car would go too far into the road. Okay, so my question is, since this patio is 4.5 feet already going towards the road, if you have a car line up head first up to the patio, aren't you going to have 4.5 feet of car, almost the whole trunk width and length into the road?
Oh, absolutely. They are clearly
not
parking in the road right
There's no
away.
parking.
No parking at all there.
There's no head-in parking here, no. I mean, and if you looked at it, you wouldn't think to head in.
Yeah, no one would
Because the
try.
patio-
There's 4 or 5
curb.
parallel spots across
That
the
other
street.
one is back a little
Right,
bit
so
more.
nobody can park in front of the restaurant.
Correct.
No.
No.
And on ours, I don't know about the next door neighbor site, but this property had 4 spaces approved in the rear. I don't think they did next door. They did their parking in front.
None, yeah. next
So,
door.
and I think that's the
But then you have
difference.
to know to go back into that alleyway, and you have to figure out that that's a public alleyway.
Well,
Exactly.
And you have to hope that no employees are parked there.
A
already.
truck or a landscape truck.
well, no, maybe you want employee. I mean,
Well, I mean, it's more ideal.
you're approved for 4 parking spaces, which is substandard, but it's what you have approval. I think you need to have.
Well, actually, it is standard because we paid 4 feet
Right,
in lieu
of
of park.
course.
So we
Well,
paid up.
well, I don't think you're fighting it. That
If it
you
was
got to have 4
today,
spaces, right?
It wouldn't be.
But you agree to have 4 spaces to show.
Oh, yeah. And they're still there. I mean, there's no change at all to the parking areas on this site.
All right, so we're trying to get through it here. Septic, I think, same deal. If you submit that approval or we just show there's no large capacity cesspool, then you're fine in my book. I think all of the setbacks in a central business district, I think it makes sense to waive them. Stormwater, same deal. I think for any new structures, you should contain that stormwater. I think you got to comply with coverage, which you've already said you will do, or get the required variance. And I think you have to show code compliant lighting. Probably not an onerous thing. And I think you can work that out with Tina, knows way more than me about it.
Okay. That's it?
That's it.
Anybody else have anything they want to add on this one?
Yeah, Sam, I just have a question where the town board did this Montauk Hamlet study and adopted it, I believe, and they were supposed to look at sidewalks and all of that. And I'm just wondering if the planning department has had an opportunity to look at that and whether or not it's any use or not here.
I have not looked at that.
You'll look into that?
I can, absolutely.
It's part of the skate park. They've got jumps on the sidewalk.
All right. Ed, you have anything?
Nope.
No?
Nope.
All right, we've run through the questions. I think we know how this will go. Does the planning board find the placement of structures in the rear, side yard, and front property and correlating need to waive setbacks acceptable?
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that the applicant requires formal approval for use of town right-of-way for permanent structures or must restore right-of-way?
Yes.
Should the applicant submit sanitary system information?
Yes.
Yeah, for this one, he
Should
hasn't.
the applicant submit information on stormwater infrastructure serving the site?
Yes.
Yes.
Does the planning board agree that applicant should clarify its survey and plans as requested above?
Yes.
Yes.
Should the applicant clarify its fencing plans?
Yes.
Should the applicant clarify its parking area plans?
Yes.
And last, should the applicant submit a lighting plan that includes the required information?
Yes.
And that's all around yes. All right, Mr. Hammer, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Now we're going to go into our regular meeting. We have three boards of review. That's our regular meeting for tonight. The first one is the request of Gabriel Da Silva for a building permit on the premises located at 39 Bayview Avenue, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-106-1-16. Before I read the requested road improvements, we did receive a letter from a member of the public, and I'm turning to Nancy for a little clarification on.
Yes, we did. You're right, Chair. We did receive a letter. I think questioning what this is all about and also questioning the procedure for such things. So this application is for road widening and also road improvements. And it seemed to be a question pretty much indicating that they needed to get the road widening easement in before anything can be done, or before anything gets started. The part of the town code that regulates this is 232-1-60, which is the effect of the adoption of urban renewal plan. And part B of that, just to summarize it, I have the whole code section I can read if you'd like. It just says that there can be no permits issued for basically for UR work, and else there's an application for a UR assignment submitted. And then this also allows for the submission of an undertaking, which is generally a bond for the security, so that the applicant can get the building permit without first having the actual road widening easement done and the road work. And then the main part is that it says no certificate of occupancy may be issued by the building inspector until that all that work is actually done. So just to sum it up again, any applicant can get the building permit as long as that there is an undertaking accepted by the board.
And the work.
But no CO until everything's finished up.
Ian, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I think the question though, well, the way I understand the question is a little bit different, which is, can they get the road work approval from us before they have a building permit?
They can get the approval, sure. They just can't do anything until they get the undertaking.
But there's no problem with doing the road assignment before having a building
Right.
permit?
Yeah, that's pretty much how
That's the purpose of the undertaking.
yes.
Well, just because the way that you summarized that code was saying they can, they're able to do if they have the building permit, they can get the road work, but they can do it the other way too, for sure? Because I think that was the way I understood the question.
Right, yeah. As long as they have the undertaking to be able to do it so that the town knows that they are in fact going to get this done. And then after everything's all done, they get their CO, and then people normally just put in to have the undertaking released. Or they just do the work itself.
Yeah,
It seems like 99% of the time they do the bond just to get things
Is there a
going.
specific part of that code section that says they don't need a building permit before? Because that was the way I understood the question, that somebody thinks you need a building permit in order to initiate.
Well, Part A says permits, no building permit, natural resources permit. Variances shall be issued until until the boundary lines of such UR map are shown. No town authorization permits, now back into B, shall be issued in connection with this until including a residence on any vacant urban renewal parcel until the owner thereof shall have made proper application to the town planning board for a review as to the specific work and improvements required, which would basically be what
So
Vinnie
that's
gives
saying
us.
they need to apply for us before the building
Right, they
permit,
need to apply
which is the order in which
for
you're
it,
going.
right.
Okay.
And then this says, the planning board in its determination may permit the owner to execute an undertaking, or I call it security bond, in favor of the town secured for no less than the dollar amount of RIU assignment in order to obtain a building permit prior to actually carrying out the required RIU work. So again, that's all in Town Code Section 232-160B for the most part.
And the work is all, in the town code, there's a whole schedule as to how much the work, how they calculate the units, the RIUs. So, and that appears also on the, on the Board of Review. So briefly, the work on this is prepare the shoulders of the roadway along the edge of pavement on both sides of the road, including clearing on the westerly side and the existing pavement surface as is necessary, starting approximately 1,070 feet from the intersection of Lazy Point Road and Bayview Avenue, the property line between urban renewal parcel 20 and parcel 21, as directed by the town engineer, and continuing north along Bayview Avenue for a distance of 281 linear feet in accordance with the proposed asphalt pavement work as specified herein. And then following the same area of work, prepare a stabilized soil base on the westerly side of the existing asphalt pavement as is necessary to widen the roadway a width of 20 feet, starting along those same parameters I just gave. Then next is perform asphalt-based course paving work along the westerly side of the existing asphalt pavement as is necessary to widen the roadway to a width of 20 feet, starting again approximately 1,070 feet from the intersection of Lazy Point Road and Bayview Avenue. The asphalt work shall involve placement of a minimum of 2.5 inches compacted thickness of New York State Department of Transportation Type 3 asphalt binder course as directed by the town engineer. And finally, perform asphalt top course paving work starting approximately, again, 1,070 feet from the intersection of Lazy Point and Bayview Avenue. Again, continuing 281 linear feet, I should say. So having read the, and again, the bond on that is $20,000. So
Sam, there was an issue raised about wetlands, because there's a lot of wetlands.
Randy, Randy, you're right. And actually, I think this warrants some discussion because I happened to be in the office today when the engineer was there and spoke with him on this as there was letters from the public coming in with, I think, 3 major concerns. A while back, there was concerns about wetlands. This road work actually was moved to a part of the road to avoid the wetlands. So they're not paving into wetlands. So I think the engineering here is sound, and the part of the road to be improved, I think is appropriate and not going to interfere with wetlands at all. The other question was of procedure in terms
and
of.
It doesn't require a wetlands permit too.
No. Well, it's already, the road work that's being done is already in a section of road that already exists. The previous concern was extending the roadway north into wetlands towards properties that weren't developed. This road work is actually a section of road that is already there. It's just widening it and making it a better road.
Widening it, if there's a wetland within jurisdiction, would require a wetlands permit.
I guess I would defer to Tina on that, but we talked at length about it, and I don't think that there were.
This parcel, this 281 feet is not in the wetlands, correct?
That's my understanding.
It's not.
It's not within the wetland jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's my understanding. Ian, yours?
My understanding too.
Yeah, and that was verified by the town engineer?
That's 150 feet.
281 linear feet, Randy.
No, 150 feet from the edge of wetlands is the jurisdiction.
To be honest with you, I'm not positive about that distance, but the town UR map has the road here. So, I mean, I think it was a positive development that we didn't keep going north where there was real wetland concerns. But to modernize a road that already exists, that definitely isn't on wetlands, I think is appropriate, so long as, unless the town board changes their map. But Randy, I didn't measure with 150 feet or not. I don't know.
Well, the state and the town both have wetland jurisdiction, and I think we should be sure that we're not widening a road within those jurisdictions without permits, that's all. Or that the applicant is.
So the property is going before ZBA
for an
next
NRSP.
week, and these are issues that are within the ZBA jurisdiction. Brian has told me there are no wetland setback variances required, which means that they're not within the 150 feet.
Okay.
Are the 100 feet for structures, they may be within the 150 feet, makes them in jurisdiction for an NRSP. Right, so there's a difference. You need a setback variance if you get a structure within 100 feet. You're in jurisdiction for NRSP if you're within 150. They definitely need an NRSP, so they're within 150.
The property, though, but I don't know how that applies to road assignments.
But the point is that it's not our lane. It's
It's
the
going to
ZBA, it's the ZBA's lane.
Yeah, so.
So,
Well, so the question is, what does this guy need to get a building permit to do the work?
Yeah,
Or-
and clarify too, the planning board approving the road assignment is in no way should be construed by anybody authorizing work that's in G jurisdiction.
Well, Randy's concerned about the road work itself
Yeah.
impinging,
But, you approving the road assignment does not release the applicant of their responsibility to comply with DEC regulations or NRSP. You're looking at the things in your jurisdiction, which is the roadway assignment pursuant to the UR, right? And those other issues are also issues that are being addressed in the separate.
what we're doing here is a very narrow lane.
Yeah.
Going to
Yeah.
press the road metaphor a little hard. All the other requirements of law remain in place.
You can make your decision subject to any approvals required from ZBA and DEC, and nothing you do here should be construed to,
I don't think we have to explicitly do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I don't know though, because if we're approving a road assignment, they can then start the road work. I don't think there are any other approvals that happen before they can do
I think that's true.
But Randy, I think it's a good concern. I think it's why this was actually delayed and the road assignment was changed by the engineer. I mean, speaking with Tina and Brian Frank today, I think that the wetland concern was contemplated and everybody thought that it was okay. That might not satisfy you, but I think that there were.
No,
Your point is a good one, and there was a lot of discussion about it. But I think
I'm not sure the process really. I'm not sure the process, like who is responsible for complying with the wetland regulations when we give out a road assignment.
Well, I think if you're repaving a highway though that goes through Napeague, like you're in jurisdiction. I don't know that roads follow the same rules as a structure.
Yeah, they do. Especially widening a road, but you have to meet the state. Unless you're the state, you have to comply with the wetland regulations. And here, this is not the town doing work; it's a private developer, really. So I'm just not sure who's accountable for complying with the wetland regs. That's all.
The town requiring the work, though, so it's as if the town is as if the town is doing it through the developer. It's not a developer doing it for their own purposes. It's a requirement of the town because the town sees it as a benefit to modernize urban renewal roads.
And they want building permits to build new houses sitting there too, right? That's why they're asking.
Well, of course, but that's why the road work moved to this location, because before there was a real concern that they were breaking ground on new road that would have real wetland implications. These are certainly fewer. I get your point, and you're saying that maybe this shouldn't be changed either. But the thing is the engineer has to be able to tell them someplace to do work. Otherwise, I'm sure there'd be legal problems if we just said there's no place you can do work, therefore you can't get a building permit on an otherwise developable lot. If in fact it is, I understand they're before ZBA for that end of things.
And in selecting the space that the road work's going to be done, the engineer is, as an engineer, complying with the requirements of the law, including the wetlands placement.
I'm certainly confident in that part of it. So I think there was the procedure, the procedure, where the road work was going to be. And there was a third part of this that was if work has already been done. And Nancy, I guess I'd ask you, I don't know the implications of that. If work has started before they get approval, I mean, typically.
Do we know about that?
I don't think we know about it, and I'm not saying it's true or not, but it was suggested that's the case. I don't know how it would change anything for us, to be honest with you, because
Was that specifically, was that implication specific in the letter though?
it was.
Yes. There was an email that came in after we spoke.
Yes.
And it was very explicit that work seems to have been started.
What's the impact if work has been started?
That's just a code enforcement thing, right?
It's nothing does that get in the way of our making our approval?
I don't think
That
so.
would be my question for Nancy.
Right, no, yeah, it's totally separate.
So somebody else
Mhm.
would have
They
to.
jumped the gun.
Investigate.
Well, maybe. I don't even know if they did. I just want to be,
because
I want to make sure that we're addressing the three issues because there's a lot of conversation about this and I think appropriately.
Yeah.
So, but in that context, I'm comfortable moving forward because I think the process is correct according to council.
in the code.
And if the jumping the gun, if the jumping the
engineering's
gun is
good.
nothing we can do, is not in our purview.
Well, yeah, hopefully, and to me, it sounded like code enforcement had been, involved, notified or something. So if there's an issue there, I think that's a separate
And that's
track.
They have their remedies.
Is it
So-
possible that the developer would do the road work and then not get a permit to build the house?
Well, that was another question because if they're getting a variance in order to get a building permit, why would they want to do the road work? I mean, they seem pretty confident that their lot is buildable, and I think they can't get a building permit. It sounds like, according to the code section Nancy's referencing, until they do the road work. So it wouldn't behoove them to do it. Otherwise, they're just building a road for the town.
Right.
Nobody chooses to do that. You have to if you're part of an urban renewal map.
Well, it's a private road. It's a private road. It's
Yeah,
not
but what I'm saying, Randy and Lou, is nobody's like, oh, I want to build a road secretly and pretend to build a house so I can build the road.
But that implies that the developer thinks building the house is a fait accompli. That it's,
It does imply that, you're right.
even though they need to get certain variances, which may not be approved.
Well, let's hope. for
It
him.
does imply that. I just don't know how it changes our decision here.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't.
Well, it's possible the urban renewal map needs to be modified based on modern conditions, that they didn't take into account all the wetlands when they did those maps in 1974. So
Sure, and I think that's why the road assignment moved from a place that was breaking new ground that could have been a real problem to a place where road already existed that, current residents use for access. So
that whole area is in the floodplain. It's got a shallow depth of groundwater. It's a real problem area. So
no, it is, but this section of road, yeah, it is a problem there. You're right.
I'm gonna abstain on this one.
I just want to say that if there's a concern that the approval from this board authorizes the shovel in the ground, right, without any other,
It doesn't.
I mean, we should be either explicit in our approval that if DEC approvals are required or NRSP approvals are required, they get issued. And that the applicant is the one responsible for ensuring those requirements are met, unless you want us to double back and confirm. I believe that the road is not in wetlands jurisdiction. I don't have crisp mapping that shows me that, but that's all the conversations. And I just don't want the board to be construed as authorizing, okay, get started on this if there is DEC.
Well,
I think we
if
should
there's
just,
sufficient support on the board for adding that language, then the Board of Review, as we have it written now, is.
I don't know about that though, because it's
Not
the engineer acting as town engineer who chose the work. It's not the applicant.
That's,
So,
that's his job.
I think
yeah.
it wouldn't be fair for us to say, do this, but make sure it's okay. And then the road is already used. So I would not want to pause for that reason.
Well, when you read the code, I mean, it talks about the board, this body and the town engineer together, both of us addressing the Board of Review. And the reason they have these two different bodies, the town engineer and us, is because the town engineer presumably is figuring out the right place, the legal place to do the
And the
road
engineer
work.
clearly had thought quite a bit about it. And and again, it was changed at one point from a bad location to a better location. I do think it would be onerous on the applicant to then say, you have to do it here, but maybe it's not okay.
Well, once again, the lanes, I mean, what is the board's responsibility? What is the engineer's responsibility? If the engineer's responsibility is to place the road improvement in the legal place, then that's his job. And
I agree.
who are we to say, make sure you're doing it right?
Well, then why do we have to bless it then, Sam?
Because the code says so.
That's a fairly
I
good
know.
question.
So the assumption there is that we are supposed to provide some form of review.
But in
Otherwise-
terms of planning.
And in this case, we have, because at a certain point, a road assignment was changed to a different location based on issues that were brought up and we discussed.
Our responsibility, our planning
I
responsibility.
think it'd be hard to say that we didn't do, whether we're right or wrong here, but that we didn't do due diligence, we didn't think about, it wasn't a rubber stamp here.
No, certainly not. And
who knows where the vote goes? I don't know.
to your, yeah, right. We do have to vote. But to your point, the engineer does the engineering. We do the planning, and they're different things. And and I'm comfortable with the idea that the engineer has done his job and has placed the road improvement in a place that is not going to violate any laws, so and wetlands or otherwise.
And furthermore, not speaking for Brian Frank, who's obviously well aware of these types of issues, was also, speaking with the engineer and didn't seem concerned about that particular issue, which gives me a lot more comfort.
Yeah, I can say that too. I talked to Brian also.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Okay, so I'm going to move for the approval of having read the Board of Review, heard from council, heard from the planning department. I move for the approval of the Board of Review of at the request of Gabriel De Silva, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-106-1-16. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll
Any
abstain.
abstentions?
One.
Randy, was that an abstention?
Yes.
601 on that. The next two are presumably going to be easier or more straightforward. Next is the application of Mark Edwards Company, care of Tara Burke, Lighthouse Land Planning for a building permit at 39 Fairview Avenue in Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-19-8-14.1. The work to be done on this one: prepare the shoulders of the roadway along the edge of pavement on both sides of the road, including the pavement surface as is necessary, starting approximately 450 linear feet from the intersection of Fairview Avenue and Fairlawn Drive as directed by the town engineer, continuing along Fairview Drive for a minimum distance of 450 linear feet in accordance with the proposed asphalt pavement resurfacing work. And number two, perform asphalt top course paving resurfacing work starting approximately 450 linear feet from the intersection of Fairview Avenue and Fairlawn Drive and continuing south for a distance of 450 linear feet. And asphalt pavement work shall involve placing a minimum of 1.5-inch compacted thickness of New York State Type 6 asphalt top course, a minimum width of 20 feet as directed by the town engineer and/or highway superintendent. I move for the approval of this Board of Review. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 7-0, guys, on the screen? Okay, next one, slightly different, but listen carefully. Applicate the request of Mark Edwards, care of Tara Burke, Lighthouse Land Planning, for premises located at 55 Fairview Avenue in Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-19-8-15 and 16. Oh, I'm sorry. On the last one, the bond was $15,500. Likewise, the bond is $15,500, and the work is prepare the shoulders of the roadway along the edge of pavement on both sides of the road, including the pavement surface as is necessary, starting at the intersection of Fairview Avenue and Fairlawn Drive, as directed by the town engineer, and continuing Fairlawn Drive for a distance of 450 linear feet in accordance with the proposed asphalt pavement resurfacing work. Number two, perform asphalt top course paving resurfacing work at the intersection of Fairview Avenue and Fairlawn Drive and continuing south for a distance of 450 linear feet. The asphalt pavement work shall involve placing a minimum of 1.5-inch compact thickness of New York State Type 6 asphalt top course at a minimum width of 20 feet as directed by the town engineer and/or the highway superintendent. Again, the bond on this is $15,500. I've read the Board of Review and I move for its adoption. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
I,
Passed 7-0. So those are 900 linear feet. We just
Motion to adjourn.
motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.